Chapter 808. My lord, don't tell me you're really going to sleep at Emperor's place? The small monk struggled to move his short legs as he furrowed his brows. Phoenix used the holy water that the man gave her to water the Bodhi tree as she replied, "Of course it's true, but you can't leave Buddhism." The small monk said seriously, "If you leave, you'll feel uncomfortable." Phoenix turned around and glanced at the small monk. "I'll be fine if I stay with that person." "Why?" The small monk didn't understand. Phoenix opened the second bottle and said, "Because he has never converted, so he won't be controlled by Buddhism." "There's actually someone who hasn't converted." The small monk opened his eyes wide. In his mind, one had to convert to become a god or a Buddha. Phoenix naturally knew what the small monk was thinking. She yawned lazily and said, "He's different. He was originally formed from the essence of heaven and earth. He doesn't need to convert to become a Buddha or a god. It's all up to him." The small monk was stunned. No wonder everyone says that Emperor is powerful. So that's why. It also depends on the person. There are a few who were formed from the essence of heaven and earth. However, Buddhism can't do anything to this person. Back then, Buddhism also wanted to convert him. Until now, they still want to subdue him. Phoenix smiled at the end of her sentence. There was a hint of mockery in her smile. Who was she mocking? Buddha? The small monk felt that he had seen wrongly. He shook his head and looked at Phoenix, who was pouring the second bottle of holy water. Only then did he realize that something was wrong. "My lord, why did you pour 2 bottles of holy water today?" "Oh, I'm going to spend the night outside. If it's comfortable to sleep at Emperor's place, I might sleep for 2 more days." As someone who had never been a guest at someone else's place, Phoenix felt that it was very interesting. Moreover, that person had many demons at his place. When she was free, she could feed them like goldfish. Phoenix felt that it was interesting, but the small monk felt like he was struck by lightning. "Isn't it enough to sleep for a while? You want me to stay for 2 more days? So you can go pack up now. Help me put on my robe too." After Phoenix finished speaking, she stood up and said to Bodhi in a low voice, "Now that someone is inviting me over as a guest, shouldn't I bring some gifts?" "Forget it, he has everything anyway." No one knew what Phoenix meant by that. Only Subhuti could understand. It had been hundreds of years since the day little Phoenix came to the huge mountain Tenya. Finally, there was someone who was willing to be her friend. He could finally not be so lonely. From dusk to sunset, Bodhi was still standing in front of the Buddhist gate, swaying gently. But this time the wind was much gentler. Amidst the Sanskrit chants, he blew open the scripture belonging to the phoenix, deceiving the layers of Buddhist chants. All the mockery and disrespect that rose in Phoenix's heart. Everything was well whitewashed by him. This was the only way to stall for time and allow her to do what she wanted to do. Because once Phoenix was rebellious, Buddhism would immediately send a heavenly tribulation. This was the only thing he could do to make her feel less lonely, even if the person who made her feel happy was not him. Perhaps no one knew. How did Bodhi feel at that moment, standing in the vast sea of clouds? There was something he had never told Phoenix. He would help her do what she wanted to do. If one day she was injured and wanted to return, he would wait for her at the same place. But Bodhi knew that once that person made a decision, she would not turn back. It was nighttime. The sky was full of stars. Tiandao was different from the human world. One could see the Milky Way when one looked down. Phoenix had seen such a scene many times. But today, it was more beautiful than usual. Sleeping in someone else's house. She had always thought that she would not have the chance. She did not expect to fulfill such a wish in her lifetime. At that time, little Phoenix's thoughts were so simple. Moreover, they were very polite and brought gifts, but they were all fish food, so that she could feed those demons when she was bored at night. When the immortals saw Phoenix coming from afar, every one of them looked like they were facing a formidable enemy. Those who were yawning stopped, those who rubbed their eyes stopped, and even those who were walking almost fell down. "Quick! Inform all the immortals that Lord Phoenix is here. She's holding something in her hand. It must be a weapon. She's here to fight with Her Highness." But Her Highness is still sleeping. What should we do? What should we do? The others can't beat Lord Phoenix. Calm down. How can you panic as an immortal? If you're not panicking, you go. I. Phoenix looked at the immortals who were pushing each other back. She wanted to ask someone for directions, but no one dared to come close to her within 5 meters. Phoenix looked left and right. She had no choice but to grab one of the immortals. That immortal shouted, "Lord Phoenix, I have children and elders. I'm also skinny. I can't take a beating. You won't feel good if you beat me." Phoenix smiled and thought that this immortal was quite interesting. "Who said I'm here to beat you up? Where's your emperor?" "Emperor isn't here. He's gone out." "Really?" The immortal was afraid that Phoenix would not believe him, so he spoke reasonably in order to prevent an assassination. "Recently, there have been a lot of matchmaking for emperor. He went to a banquet." Phoenix raised her beautiful eyebrows and smiled even wider. "Do you know what happened to someone who lied to me last time?" Hearing this, the immortal's body stiffened. "Come, I'll give you another chance. Tell me, where's your emperor?" Phoenix's tone was very gentle. However, the gentler she was, the more afraid the immortal was. He stretched out his finger and pointed behind him. After getting the answer he wanted, Phoenix smiled and let go of the immortal. Then she passed the thing in her other hand to him. "This is a gift for your emperor." A gift! The immortal did not dare to accept it. He did not believe that it was a gift. This must be a trap. Definitely. How could Lord Phoenix give his emperor a gift? It was more likely that she gave him a bomb. Phoenix saw that he did not move, so she could only take back her hand. She originally wanted to be a polite guest like an ordinary person, but now it seemed that the effect was not good. The immortal saw that Phoenix was indeed different from usual. He hesitated for a while and asked, "Lord, are you really here to give the emperor a gift?" Phoenix nodded. Was it strange for her to give a gift? The immortal still refused to believe it. At this moment, an old immortal came out from inside. When he saw Phoenix standing outside the door, he quickly greeted her. "Lord, why are you here so early? The emperor told me that you would come tonight. I thought you would only come after reciting the scriptures. I was about to ask someone to pick you up from Buddhism." Chapter 809. You don't have to recite the scriptures today. Phoenix wasn't paying attention when she was reciting the scriptures. She smiled and passed the item in her hand over. "This is for your emperor." The old immortal hurriedly took it with both hands. "The emperor will be happy to see this. He has been waiting for you for a long time and is now resting. The emperor specially instructed me to bring you into the palace when you arrive." Phoenix's attention wasn't on the fact that the man had been waiting for her. Little Phoenix felt a sense of accomplishment because the gift she had prepared was finally delivered successfully. She was very happy about this. The immortals were still in a state of disbelief. They looked at Phoenix's back in astonishment and tugged at the old immortal's sleeve. "Old immortal, did the emperor really instruct Lady Phoenix to enter the palace? Are they really not going to fight?" All right, stop guessing. Lady Phoenix is here as a guest. She might even stay here for a few days. Be smart and don't talk nonsense in front of her. Be careful, the emperor might punish you if he's unhappy," the old immortal said. The immortals were stunned and looked at each other. "Did you hear that just now? My ears must be playing tricks on me. Ha ha ha, stay for a few days? The emperor has never let anyone stay overnight, let alone Lady Phoenix, who has always been at odds with the emperor. If that's the case," one of the immortals muttered to himself, "the rumor might be true." The others looked at him. What rumor? The immortal didn't expect that his words would cause such a big reaction. He lowered his voice and said, "Someone said that during the banquet today, the emperor announced that he and Lady Phoenix are together." Hearing this, all the immortals were petrified. Their mouths were wide open as they stood rooted to the ground. Phoenix didn't think much of the commotion caused by the immortals. After all, she also liked to see other people's shocked expressions. The Dowager Duchess brought Phoenix around a ladder and stood at the side. She bowed and said, "My lord, the emperor is inside." He never likes people to enter his chambers, so it's not convenient for this old one to enter. This way, please. Phoenix nodded and walked toward the innermost area. The heavenly Tao was different from Buddhism. No, it should be said that the man lived in a different place from the one she lived in. In Buddhism, as long as there was a floating cloud, she could sleep. But here, the towering stone pillars of the man, together with the colored glaze incense, appeared to be grand and cold everywhere. In the center of the clouds, there was a large, dark-colored bed. It looked like it was covered with crow feathers. The contrast between black and white revealed the owner's unique domineering aura. The man was sleeping on his stomach. Half of his head was buried in the pillow. His hair was disheveled, revealing half of his well-defined face. The snow-white blanket covered half of his back, leaving the other half exposed. There was also an arm that was hanging down on the ground. The well-defined honey-colored muscles were on full display. Even the rise and fall of his breathing could be seen clearly. Was he sleeping? She did not expect that such a domineering and indifferent person would be so harmless after he fell asleep. His thick eyelashes drooped down, casting shadows. His outstanding facial features looked particularly elegant in this situation. Phoenix did not disturb him. She looked at the large bookshelf behind the man. It was full of records about the heavenly Tao. Every ancient scroll that fell into the human world would be regarded as a divine record. Phoenix took a random book and sat lazily on the wooden chair beside it. Just as she opened the long scroll, the man on the bed woke up. His eyes were as cold as ice. Phoenix knew that this was the real him. No matter how polite he was at the banquet, it was only his disguise. "When did you come?" Perhaps it was because he had just woken up. The man's voice sounded deeper than usual. Phoenix closed the scroll in her hand and replied, "Just now." The man glanced at her and sat up. As the quilt slid down, the man's muscular chest and waist were exposed. There was not a trace of excess fat on his waist. His figure was so good that it could beat all the divine records in the heavenly Tao. Although Phoenix had killed many people, she had little contact with others. Seeing such a scene, she subconsciously looked away. The man smiled and patted the space beside him. "Come here. Come here." Phoenix frowned. "Don't you have any other places to sleep? Or I can lie down and sleep in the clouds." The man looked at her. After a while, he said, "The book says that we can sleep together." "Okay." Phoenix hesitated for a moment and slowly walked to the bed. The man leaned against the headboard and looked at her playfully. "Are you afraid that I will do something to you?" No. It was just that she had never slept with others before. However, if she really said it, the man would not do anything to her. Her scimitar was on her wrist. If the man dared to cross the line, she could just attack. She had heard that many people in the Sixth Tao had sent women to him, but he had never accepted them. He probably had no interest in women. Moreover, they would not have anything to do with each other. After thinking it through, Phoenix lifted the white quilt and crawled under it. She pulled the quilt to her chest and turned to look at the man. Lying so close to him, their black hair seemed to be touching each other and their breaths were intertwined. Phoenix suddenly remembered that the man seemed to be sleeping naked. For some reason, her heart started to beat faster. Yes, this was not normal. However, when Phoenix came up, the man who was sitting suddenly leaned toward her. He was so close to her that Phoenix felt uncomfortable for a moment. She did not know what the other party's scent was. It was light and heavy, with the smell of mint and the remnants of smoke. It was even pleasant. However, this person's aggressive aura was too strong, so strong that it was a little evil. "You trust me that much? I've brought you a gift." Almost at the same time, the two of them spoke. The man's fingers that were about to press down paused. "What gift?" "Wait!" Phoenix ran out excitedly. After a while, she ran back with a bag of fish food in her hand. "We can feed these to the monsters at night. Don't you like to treat them as goldfish?" The man looked at the fish food and then looked at Phoenix's beautiful eyes. The power gathered in his palm dissipated. Then, he reached out and pulled her over. With a smile on his face, he said, "Okay." It was obvious that a certain emperor liked this fish food very much. However, only the monsters knew that before Phoenix took out the gift. The Emperor's thoughts towards her were definitely not simple. Chapter 8:10. Since she was going to feed the fish, she naturally had to call out all the monsters. Although the man didn't say anything, his eyes were full of warning. He wanted them to remember not to say anything that they shouldn't say. The monsters immediately put on a "I'm very obedient, I'm a goldfish" pose. Phoenix really felt that someone's place was very good. There were so many new things here. Moreover, those monsters were very obedient after being tamed by him. They did whatever he wanted them to do. The man laughed and put his hands behind his head. "Hey, you're not going to feed the goldfish the whole night, are you?" "Of course not." Phoenix thought for a moment and looked at the man's face. Suddenly, she leaned over and her thin lips fell on his forehead. She murmured, "And a kiss, then it's done." A certain emperor didn't expect that she would kiss him. A trace of surprise flashed across his usually indifferent and handsome face. Even the monsters who were in the shape of goldfish were stunned by Phoenix's action. To be honest, they didn't expect that Phoenix would take the initiative in this kind of thing. They were already prepared for the emperor to be done this way, and that by Phoenix. Why didn't she do as they had agreed? After Phoenix kissed him, she saw that the man was looking at her coldly. It was as if what she was doing now was too much. She felt that she had to explain. "Didn't you want to kiss him? It's written on the booklet. You did want to kiss him, but your kiss was too perfunctory." The man reached out and pulled her back. When couples in the human world are together, they are never perfunctory. "If you don't know how, I can teach you." Phoenix thought for a moment and nodded. She actually agreed. At this moment, all the monsters were stunned. Phoenix had always been smart. Why was she so dumb when it came to relationships? The emperor was obviously tricking her. The man was also a little surprised. "You agreed? I heard that you're very good at this." Phoenix paused and said, "Moreover, it's my first time being a guest in someone's house. I can't let others think that I'm being perfunctory." The man looked at the serious little face in front of him and suddenly smiled. "That's interesting. Who told you that I'm very good at that?" "Oh, the last time I went to the snow region to hunt demons, I met the divine lord who was matchmaking for you. He talked to the snow mountain goddess's father and emphasized on this matter. The demons I want to hunt are in their generation, so they have no choice but to listen. In the end, they were the ones who discovered me, and all of them blushed." At this point, Phoenix was baffled. Until now, I still don't understand why those two people blushed. The fiendish demons rubbed their foreheads. Even a big girl would blush if she heard them talking about such things. And then, the man was interested to hear how she dealt with it. Phoenix looked at him and said, "Later on, I caught the monster right in front of them and brought it back to be reformed by Buddhism. The demons. At that time, they must have wanted to dig a hole and bury themselves. How could you still be in the mood to hunt demons?" The man could no longer hold back his smile. He buried his face in her neck and stopped what he was going to do. "Why are you laughing like that? Is there anything wrong with what I did?" Phoenix frowned. "I didn't want to interrupt their conversation, but you know that I can't leave Buddhism for too long. Moreover, that evil demon was jumping around in front of them. It was really challenging my patience. I told them to continue with their conversation and not to bother about me. Who knew that I would scare them away?" The man reached out and pulled Phoenix's hand over. There was a rare doting tone in his voice. "Yes, they are more timid. Only then did I know that your selling point is your ability. No wonder so many people are matchmaking for you." Phoenix covered herself with the quilt. She rarely chatted with others while lying down, so she had a lot to say. She did not realize that her last sentence made the man's eyes darken. "My selling point is my strong ability, isn't it?" Phoenix asked back. This question, which man would say that he was not strong enough? The demons looked at each other. In fact, they felt that it was not so easy for the emperor to deal with Phoenix. At the very least, until now, the emperor had not used his sinister methods. It could be seen that being dull had its benefits. Besides, Phoenix was smart. She was dull throughout the process, But her last sentence was very powerful. The man's eyes darkened, but he smiled evilly. Do you want to try? What? Phoenix raised her eyebrows. The man unbuttoned her kasaya with his fingers. His thin lips curved slightly. My ability. When he said this, the man had already activated the array. No one could break through the array, be it demons or immortals. Just like what Phoenix said, this man was the only one who would not be controlled by Buddhism. Phoenix's skin was white. The looseness of her kasaya easily exposed her collarbone and chest. There was always a kind of breathtaking beauty. Seeing this, the man's eyes became more and more gloomy. Even his breath became hotter. You're so beautiful. It's a pity that you're raised in Buddhism. Phoenix did not expect things to turn out this way. She stared at the eyes that were close to her. The next moment, the Buddhist prayer beads in her hand turned into a scimitar full of hostility. The man chuckled and glanced at her side. Then, he pressed her shoulder with one hand. Why are you using a scimitar on the bed? Don't you want me to teach you? Don't forget, you're here as a guest. When Phoenix heard the word guest, she felt that she had overreacted. She put away her scimitar and said, I won't try that kind of thing. As she said that, Phoenix reached out to push him away, but before she could touch him, the man suddenly pulled her into his arms. She did not know if it was because she had violated the Buddhist doctrine. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky and fell behind them. With a crack, sparks flew everywhere. Everything was still. In a flash, he suddenly laughed. He was completely unaffected. He reached out his finger and touched her lips gently. You don't have to try that kind of thing, but you have to connect the kiss. What do you think? The man's thin lips were only a few centimeters away from her. His fingers were also very warm. Phoenix did not know why her heart suddenly beat faster. It was just that it seemed to be too close. She had never felt this way before. Before she could figure it out, her thin lips were completely covered by another person's breath. The man's unique sandalwood scent filled her mouth. Phoenix suddenly widened her eyes. Just like that, she stared at him blankly. The man's eyes were slightly closed. His eyelashes were still trembling. His tall nose was close to hers, and there was a light smile at the tip of his brows and the corners of his eyes. Chapter 8:11. Even his hand was holding the back of her head. He kissed her hard and started to attack her crazily. It was not like the man's usual behavior at all. Phoenix felt like she was suffocating. Her mind was filled with white snowflakes. She had never felt like this before. All the oxygen was taken away by him. Her chest was pressed down. The tall body on top of her was getting hotter and hotter, as if it was going to burn her up. The longer they kissed, the more numb her tongue became. He gently parted his lips and his voice was strangely hoarse. How do you feel? Feel? Phoenix subconsciously wanted to reject such intimacy. However, her arms were firmly held by the man. He looked at her for a while and his hand reached under her chin. Phoenix's kasaya was wide, so it was convenient for the man to do this kind of thing. This is the first time I feel that the clothes of Buddhism are not bad. The man smiled and pressed his lips against her ear. He touched it with the tip of his hot tongue and slowly moved down. Phoenix's body went numb and stiffened. She felt as if she had been electrocuted. Her body twisted uncontrollably in the warm blanket. She did not allow him to continue his impudence. She clasped his wrist. Her breath was a little chaotic. It feels a little strange. It should be enough for practice. Enough? The man reached out and stroked her skin. It was so soft and tender that it almost absorbed his hand. How could such a touch be enough? Phoenix looked at him. Yes, it's enough. Okay. The man let go of his hand and smiled again with a playful look. His fingers patted her back gently as if he was treating his pet. It's enough for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Such an interesting Phoenix, of course, he had to eat slowly. Phoenix felt as if someone was pressing something against her thigh. It was very hot and she felt somewhat uncomfortable. However, it seemed that no one had hugged her to sleep since she was a child. Phoenix could remember things from when she was reciting scriptures on Mount Tenya. She remembered that at that time, The people around her would always look at her with strange gazes. Because in Buddhism, other than the little monk and the little monk, there had never been a child who looked like her. The Venerable held her hand and introduced her to everyone. So she's that phoenix. Which phoenix? It's the phoenix born from hell. The phoenix that symbolizes great misfortune. Why would Phoenix have such a bad omen? Yes, Phoenix was also wondering why she had such a bad omen. At that time, little Phoenix already knew how to recite scriptures and knew what a great omen was. An existence that was not expected or liked by others. The days that followed seemed to prove this point. No one spoke to her. The little phoenixes in Mountain Tenya were all alone. She stayed quietly and obediently. She never talked to anyone, let alone made friends. She had also seen some little novice monks who were on good terms with each other would sleep together. Everyone looked happy. Indeed, it was very warm to be hugged by someone. It was like an invisible air that surrounded her under the tight blanket. Moreover, the way the man patted her back was really beautiful. Phoenix felt that she had gained something. She reached out and hugged the man's waist that felt good to the touch. She muttered, "Yu Lao's handbook is really good." The man lowered his head and looked at Phoenix in his arms. He smiled and said, "It's really good. What were you thinking about just now?" "Nothing." Phoenix tilted her head. "I was thinking about what happened when I was born. You should know that I was born from hell. They said that there were originally 2 eggs, but when they broke out of the shell, only I was left." The man smiled ambiguously. "You're saying that the moment you broke out of the shell, the blood sea sent down 33 thunder tribulations. You were born with a face of extreme evil?" "Yes." Phoenix closed her eyes. She looked like she was going to sleep. The man reached out and brushed away the long hair on her face. His voice was faint. "If you weren't born with the face of extreme evil, no one would use Buddhism. These people always need someone to hold a knife to achieve their deliverance of all living beings. Since that's the case, why should they decide whether it's good or bad?" When Phoenix heard the last sentence, she opened her eyes again. There seemed to be countless dazzling stars in the bottom of her eyes. "You're right. Are you that happy?" The man chuckled. Phoenix sat up. "A little. Let's continue to feed those demons fish food. Or should we go and fight?" The demons were speechless. "Is this how you express your joy?" Therefore, that day, the demons from the blood sea almost vomited after eating the fish food. However, they didn't understand what the emperor meant. They had never seen a man pamper Phoenix like he pampered someone else. Could it be that he was sincere? That shouldn't be possible. They knew what this man wanted to do. Once he got what he wanted, it wouldn't be too fresh. He had always been like this. The man indeed thought the same, although he treated Phoenix differently from others. However, what he wanted to do had never changed. He wanted to completely destroy this proud person. Now was not enough. Her eyes were still not completely looking at him. The man had never forgotten what Phoenix looked like when he first saw her. At that time, she was still young, but she grew up to look like a teenager. In order to convert him, Buddhism trapped him in the forbidden land of the 33rd heaven. He only sneered at those Sanskrit words, and it was a piercing pain. However, these could not subdue him. He broke the thunder shield and was covered in blood. The Venerable retreated in the face of difficulties, causing the clouds to surge. 49 days passed. As long as he could resist the Sanskrit words, he would not be restrained by Buddhism. On the 47th day, he met her. She held the scripture and looked at him with her head tilted. Then, she knelt beside him and looked at him again. She asked, "Why are you kneeling here?" He ignored her. He had always disdained people from Buddhism, not to mention that she was still a child. She was quiet. After a while, she ran away. When she reappeared, there was a steamed bun in her hand. At that time, he did not have a divine position. He came from chaos, so it was easy for him to go hungry. However, he did not expect that there would be someone in Buddhism who dared to send him food. However, he was indifferent by nature. He did not care about the consequences of breaking the Buddhist precepts. He ate when there was food. Later, on the 49th day, he broke through the light of Buddha. There was nothing in this world that could bind him anymore. Originally, it was just a sharp blade of Buddhism. He did not care much about it. However, when he saw her again, she only had eyes for the Bodhi tree. When she passed by him, she had a curved blade in her hand. She looked cold. The man admitted that he was such an impatient person. Since the other party didn't have him in her eyes, then he would break her pride. Chapter 8:12. The news of Phoenix's visit to Tiandao spread the next day. All the immortals gathered to discuss matters related to Tiandao. From time to time, they would glance at the emperor who was sitting in the seat of honor. When the meeting was over, the old man who wanted to introduce the snow mountain goddess to the emperor leaned over and asked carefully, "Emperor, I heard that Phoenix went to look for you last night?" "Yes." The man glanced at the old man and recalled what Phoenix told him last night. He smiled and asked, "What's the matter?" The old man saw that he had spoken and continued to dawdle. "Is Phoenix here to fight with you? Who won in the end?" "Emperor, I don't mean anything else. I just feel that the sea of blood has just been cleared, so it's not suitable to have a dispute with Buddhism." At the end of his speech, the old man was afraid that the emperor would misunderstand his meaning, so he added an additional explanation. "Who said that she's here to fight with me?" The man crossed his legs slightly and smiled at the old man. The old man could not tell whether he was happy or angry from his attitude. However, other than fighting, the old man could not think of any other reason why Phoenix would look for the emperor. Buddhism would not tolerate the emperor bringing these demons to Mount Tenya again. It was understandable that Phoenix would be sent to Tiandao to purge them. So, what else could it be if not a fight? The old man was seriously doubtful. The other immortals also stopped in their tracks, intending to listen to some gossip. The man stood up and walked to the old man with his slender legs. "As my fiancée, she wants to connect with me." The old man almost choked on his saliva. He said in shock, "Connect? Fiancée?" This was even more horrifying than if they had perished together. Emperor glanced at him. "Why? Didn't you hear the news that we planned to be together at the banquet? Isn't that a rumor?" The old man did not take it seriously. Emperor's thin lips curved and he looked devilishly handsome. "It's not a rumor. She's staying in my bedroom now." Almost in an instant, the great hall exploded. The immortal monarchs who were about to leave all stopped in their tracks. One after another, they said, "What the emperor just said can't be true, right?" "I think it's true. The emperor would never joke about such things." "But why did I hear that Phoenix was armed when she came yesterday?" "I don't know about that. The main point isn't what Phoenix brought back. The main point is that she's now living with Emperor." The man did not care about the discussions around him. In fact, he was very happy to see such a scene. From today onwards, no one would bother him with blind dates. Moreover, whether it was Tiandao or Buddhism, they would all know that Phoenix belonged to him. Yu Lao looked at Emperor's expression, and the worry on his face became even more intense. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Seeing the man walking out of the heavenly court, she followed him. "Emperor, Emperor, wait for me." It took some effort for Yu Lao to keep up with the man. The man stopped the floating cloud under his feet. There was no expression on his face. He glanced at Yu Lao indifferently and immediately felt like he was looking down on him. Yu Lao knew that he shouldn't speak. Being stared at by the man like this, his head buzzed a little, and his voice became much softer. The things that the emperor took from this old man really can't be used casually, especially when it's used on the Phoenix. "Yu Lao." The man turned around. Although there was still a smile on his face, his eyes were cold. For some reason, it made people feel a murderous aura. "What do you think will happen to a divine lord who is in charge of marriage because he drank too much and lost the red string of fate?" Yu Lao heard the threat in the man's words and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. "Emperor, it's not that I want to hinder you, but this marriage is really different from other things. Phoenix is destined to stay in Buddhism. Moreover, Phoenix doesn't like Emperor either. What's the use of tying the red string of fate on her hand like this? What's the use?" The man sneered and patted Yu Lao's shoulder. "What's the use? That's for me. You don't have to worry about this." Yu Lao was anxious. Emperor. I'm sure the Emperor doesn't like Phoenix either. It's only because she's too different that the Emperor's interest is piqued. But others are different. The Emperor knows about the Bodhi tree in Mount Tenya. The Bodhi tree has feelings because of Phoenix. In another 500 years, the Bodhi tree in front of the Buddha's gate will transform into a human and become a Buddha. He is true to Phoenix. So, for the sake of others, the Emperor should return the red string of fate to me. Hearing the last sentence, the man's fingers paused for a moment. The floating light of the way of heaven shone on his body, dark and obscure. However, it was still impossible to look away. Yu Lao looked at the man eagerly. However, he saw the man's smile, indescribably elegant and evil. I wanted to return it to you, but unfortunately, as he spoke, he raised the empty bag in his hand. It's too late. You really used the red string of fate on her. Yu Lao felt his heart beating wildly. His ears could no longer hear the sounds around him. The man retracted his hand. Wearing a white robe and a purple gauze, he stood tall like the only scenery on the edge of the way of heaven. Yu Lao, things have come to this point. If you don't tell me, no one will know where the red string of fate is. I don't want anyone to know about this. Otherwise, I've killed a god before. Yu Lao only felt a layer of sweat on his back. Not only did the other party use the red string of fate, but he also tied a dead knot. The Emperor was right. Such a thing couldn't be told. Not only because of his dereliction of duty, but also because if Buddhism found out, what would Phoenix do? Yu Lao had match-made for many people and knew many gods and fairies. He always had a sense of pity for men and women in the world. Although Phoenix was the leader of all Buddhas, she was an anomaly in Buddhism. Under normal circumstances, people were never very friendly to the anomaly. It was fine if these two people were fooling around, but they definitely couldn't fall in love. This was because Buddhism would not allow Phoenix, who saved all living beings, to have feelings in her heart. Therefore, the red string of fate must not be known to anyone. The Emperor was in a very bad mood. This was the aura that the immortals who came to welcome him could sense as soon as they opened the door. Although the Emperor didn't say anything, there was still a smile on his face, but his thin lips were cold. In particular, the demons that were usually locked up by him also surged out from behind him one by one. They formed into clusters of black fog, giving people a sense of oppression from the inside out. It was as if the Emperor in front of them could kill them at any time. Celestial Emperor, the immortal called out in a trembling voice. The man glanced at him casually. Where's Phoenix? Chapter 8:13. Ah, it's Lord Phoenix. The other immortal knocked on his own head and replied respectfully. Lord Phoenix has returned to Buddhism. She said that she's going to water the tree and will be back tonight. The man narrowed his eyes. Water the tree? For Bodhi? Yes. The immortal nodded heavily. The group of demons following behind the man could clearly feel the coldness emanating from the man's back at that moment. No one dared to move or even make the slightest sound. Until the man spoke again with an indifferent voice. I know. You can all leave now. Yes. The two immortals were relieved. They looked at each other and continued to be doormen while holding hands. However, at this moment, the sky above Tiandao was covered with a layer of gray mist because of the man's clenched hands. The man took a step forward. He seemed to be able to hear Yu Lao's words. Phoenix doesn't like Emperor either. What's the use of tying Emperor's red string to her hand? Does Emperor know about the Bodhi tree in Mount Tenya? The Bodhi tree has feelings because of Phoenix. In another 500 years, the Bodhi tree in front of Buddhism will turn into a human and become a Buddha. He's the real Phoenix. The group of demons following behind the man did not understand why the Emperor suddenly stopped. However, at that moment, the sacred tree next to him seemed to be enraged and fell with a thud. The sound was so loud that even the stargazing palace 10 meters away could feel it. However, amidst the rising dust, the man stood motionless. As his long sleeves fluttered, a chuckle could be heard. His gentle and refined appearance in front of others had completely turned into a sinister and vicious aura. It seems that this highness still hasn't done enough. Otherwise, how could she have the time to water that Bodhi tree? The group of demons did not need to think to know who the she that the emperor was talking about was. All of them tensed up and did not dare to speak. The man's eyes were cold. He stood there with his slender legs. His hair fell down, making him look a little lonely. However, this loneliness disappeared too quickly. In a flash, the man's handsome thin lips had already curved up. Since she left without even greeting me, then I can only think of a way to break her dharma. What do you think? Hearing this, the group of demons froze. What did they say? How could they dare to intervene in this kind of matter? Moreover, Phoenix was one of the Buddhas. Even the venerable ones of Buddhism couldn't do anything to her. How could she be broken so easily? Unless His Highness had something that could affect Phoenix. The man laughed again. Pass down the order. Today's vegetarian meal is to be fried with meat oil. Also, the mushroom soup is to be boiled with meat broth. Remember to get rid of the fishy smell and cover up the smell of meat. Boil it in broth? The group of demons looked at each other and understood the intention of the emperor. However, they did not dare to say or ask more. They could only wait for Phoenix to return from Buddhism. My lord, are you really going to stay in Tiandao for a long time? Little monk followed behind Phoenix. His small hands were holding the scriptures that Phoenix sorted out. He asked eagerly, hoping that their Lord Phoenix would change her mind. Phoenix raised her eyebrows. Why? Is there something wrong with Buddhism? No, it's been very peaceful recently. My lord doesn't need to go hunting. However, if my lord stays in Tiandao, won't it cause rumors? Little monk was also worried that Phoenix would be at a disadvantage. Phoenix smiled. I'll stay there for a few days. After a few days, I'll move back. This will prevent people from coming up the mountain to beg for mercy. It's best if there are more rumors. That way it will be better. It will also prevent these people from always coming to me to get my combat power. My lord, the Venerable One said that if you really want to get married, it's fine as long as you don't break the precepts and don't fall in love. The Venerable One will arrange a good marriage for you. You don't need to rush to be on good terms with the emperor. Little monk struggled to move forward with his short legs. Upon hearing this, Phoenix's smile faded. There was a hint of mockery in her eyes. If I don't break the precepts and don't fall in love, there will be a good marriage. The Venerable One is really considerate of me. My lord! Little monk more or less knew that he had said something wrong. His small face turned red. However, Phoenix did not seem to care at all. She reached out and flicked his bald head. It's nothing. If the Venerable One says these things to you in the future, you can tell him that I, Phoenix, like to rush to be on good terms with others. It's the same reason why I like to kill. Little monk reached out and grabbed the hem of her clothes as if he was apologizing. How could Phoenix be calculative with a child? She smiled and took the scriptures from his hand. At this moment, a gentle voice sighed. Little master is saying these things for my lord's sake. It was Golden Lotus. She seemed to be reciting scriptures. She held a scroll in her hand and her beautiful eyes were filled with worry for Phoenix. I know that my lord grew up in Buddhism. Although you're old, you rarely pay attention to the things that women should pay attention to. In order to purge the sins of the world, you wholeheartedly cultivated Buddhism. However, you forgot that you shouldn't be too proactive when interacting with men. Otherwise, I'm afraid that your reputation will be damaged in the future. Moreover, men won't cherish this kind of woman. It's just a fresh taste. Perhaps what Golden Lotus said will make my lord uncomfortable. However, as a fellow Buddhist, Golden Lotus really doesn't want to see my lord do something that you'll regret. Phoenix glanced in her direction. She did not say anything, but there was an aura of disdain for the world. Under that kind of gaze, Golden Lotus gradually bit her thin lips. My lord, don't think too much. Golden Lotus doesn't mean anything else. It doesn't matter if you mean anything else. Phoenix took a step forward. When she brushed past Golden Lotus, she laughed. Read the scriptures properly. It's also written in the scriptures that jealousy is the ugliest taboo for women. In an instant, the grievance on Golden Lotus' face froze. Without giving her any time to react, the figure holding the Buddhist prayer beads disappeared into the surging clouds. After leaving Golden Lotus, Phoenix immediately flipped open the manual that the man gave her. There was a clear line written on it. As a domineering partner, you must make your love rival suffer at least once. Not bad. She had completed another line. Phoenix stretched out her hand and used a spell to make a tick. She held the scriptures with a sense of accomplishment and walked in the direction of the heavenly axiom. This time, the immortals did not treat her as a duel. However, the machete in her hand was too scary. The immortals were still very afraid of it. When Phoenix saw that the immortals were afraid of the machete in her hand, she simply turned it into prayer beads and wrapped it around her wrist again. When the immortals saw her actions, they looked at each other and thought in their hearts, actually, Lord Phoenix was not as barbaric as what the outside world said. Chapter 8:14. His entire body was weak and powerless to the extreme, but his mind was clearer than ever, no matter how little contact she had with other people. At this point, Phoenix also knew what he was doing. However, she thought that he would never have such thoughts about her. However, the development of this matter challenged the limits of her imagination. Let go! When Phoenix said this, the scimitar on the ground reconstructed the Buddha's light, but it did not return to its owner's hand. The man laughed and stood up from her body. He even tidied up his clothes and looked down at her condescendingly. His thin lips curled up slightly. I've never forced anyone. Phoenix, I'll count to 10. If you can get out of here, I won't continue. If you can't get out of here, then don't resist anymore. How about it? Do you want to take a gamble? If you win, you will be safe and sound. If you lose, you will only complete one of the tasks in the book. Don't you like to do the tasks in the book? Phoenix looked at him for a long time. Okay. Anyway, at this point, this was the only thing she could do. She used her fingers to support herself on the wooden chair and tried to stand up. However, it was different from the medicine. Although she did not want anything, eating meat was breaking the Buddhist precepts. The punishment fell from the sky, making her unable to exert any strength. When she finally got up, she fell back onto the wooden chair because she could not support herself. Right now, it was as if her wings were broken. It was easy for anyone to hurt her at this moment. She thought that he would take the opportunity to humiliate her. But when she fell back, he held onto her waist to ensure that she would not be hurt in any way. With this support, Phoenix was able to stand up. 1. The man let go of her hand and his deep voice sounded. Phoenix looked at the barrier not far away. It was 4 steps away. As long as she gathered her strength, she should be able to get out of here before the man counted to 10. 2. The man did not move closer. He just stood behind her and counted the number. Phoenix took a step forward and raised her right foot. This way, she would be faster. 3. Phoenix had already taken her 3rd step. Just one more step and she would be able to leave this place. However, just as she was about to step out of the enchantment barrier, the man pulled her back. The original heat had no intention of cooling down at all. Instead, he pushed her waist even more arrogantly. His voice fell close to her ear, and it was so hoarse that it was sexy. 10. What? Phoenix looked back and tightened her grip. I always knew that the Emperor was shameless, but I didn't expect him to be this shameless. The man laughed. He did not seem to care about the marks she had left on his body. He pressed her back onto the bench. Boyu, who had a layer of black hair and white robes, said, Phoenix, in this world, the winner is the king. There is no such thing as shamelessness. Be good. Save your strength for later. For example, scream. Although I like your current soft appearance, I like to hear your voice even more. His hot breath swept over her again, but this time, his position was changed. He pressed his hand on her wrist and kissed her more than before, so much so that she didn't even have time to breathe. It turned out that he had never thought of letting her go. In this aspect, Phoenix was no match for the man. The numbness on her back was like a surge of darkness, mixed with a slight chill. No matter how much she refused, her hands were unable to exert any strength. That feeling was even more unbearable than when she was drugged. She was powerless and at the mercy of others, but she couldn't deny that the numbness brought by that person's lips and tongue made her taste a feeling she had never experienced before. Perhaps that kind of attraction had existed from the beginning. However, the two of them were too similar. They both disliked being restrained and were indifferent. They would never take the initiative to approach each other. If it wasn't for that booklet, they wouldn't have had any interaction until now. She had never thought that, in order to defeat someone, one had to obtain that person. Just as Phoenix was in a daze, the man's hand that was hugging her tightened. Suddenly, he lowered his waist, and a huge hot thing went straight into her body. It was painful and stimulating at the same time. Phoenix suddenly opened her eyes wide. Immediately after, she felt an unprecedented pain in her body, as if she was being split open by something. Phoenix struggled for a while, but was tightly held down by the man. A weak sound came from her throat, and the thing inside her body seemed to be stimulated as well. Following that, she trembled. However, the man didn't let Phoenix go at all. He held her waist and gently pulled, his hot breath hitting the back of her ear. "You better not move, or else I won't be able to control my strength. Phoenix, you should know that in your current state, it's very easy for someone to break you." Phoenix bit her lip. Her long hair fell down and fell on her smooth back. Even her eyes were dyed red. Unlike her clothes, the man's robe wasn't messy at all. Such a contrast only made Phoenix feel more ashamed. Because the man was hugging her from behind, Phoenix didn't see that the man's eyes had darkened because of her. It was as if he was looking for something. His point of impact was always different. As for Phoenix, who was trapped in his arms, she could only float up and down with his movements. She wanted to close her eyes and not look at the reflection on the marble. That kind of shameful stimulation would only make her legs go weak. However, he didn't allow it. He laughed in a low voice beside her ear. "Phoenix, the head of all Buddhas, the flaming scimitar, never admits defeat. Hey, what would happen if someone saw you like this?" Hearing this, Phoenix opened her eyes. However, the man's breathing was slightly rough as he bit the back of her neck. His large palm covered her softness from behind. He laughed hoarsely. "Are you scared?" The man's voice was very slow, as if he was deliberately tormenting her. "Don't worry, other than me. No one else will see you like this. Unless those people want to die." As the man spoke, he pumped heavily twice. It was as if he couldn't suppress his desire anymore. He started to move fiercely, as if he wanted to crush her and swallow her into his stomach. He was wild and eager. Phoenix couldn't speak at all. Every time she opened her mouth, her voice would break. The reflection on the ground made everything seem like an incomparably messy mess. The wooden chair creaked as she was dragged into a drunken stupor. An overwhelming heat and dizziness engulfed her entire body, and even her consciousness was fading away. However, the man felt that this was not satisfying enough. He pulled out the scalding heat and immediately pressed her into the soft quilt. His slightly cold fingers pressed down on her long legs forcefully, as if he had found a certain point, and fiercely penetrated straight in. Chapter 8:15. When Phoenix woke up again, she had regained her strength. However, she felt sore all over her body. Even her neck was reddened. She could see the man lying beside her. Even though he was in a deep sleep, he did not seem to want to let go of her. Even his posture was restrained. She looked to her left. One of her hands was chained to the bed by the man with the demon-binding iron chain. The man added the chain to make her give up resisting when they did it for the second time. Realizing the heat behind her waist, Phoenix's eyes darkened. Since she could not open the iron chain, she might as well break it with her fingers. This way, of course, there would be marks left on her fingers. Even her wrist couldn't be empty, with half of the demon-restraining iron chain. The Phoenix Hotel didn't want to say anything. She reached out and picked up the cassock scattered on the ground and put it on herself. She was tall, and the most beautiful thing about her was her pair of long legs. Wearing such a long robe made her slender legs look like snow, pure white and eye-catching. When the little immortals who were dozing off saw this, they woke up and wanted to say something. Phoenix stopped them. Her eyes were very calm. When your emperor wakes up, tell him that I have moved out. Huh? The little immortal did not dare to speak loudly. He only nodded and said yes. He muttered in his heart that even if she wanted to leave, she should wait until dawn. Why did she go back so early? How could he know what happened in the hall? If he knew, he would not have such an expression. He would have exploded. Phoenix took a few steps forward and then retreated. She bent down and picked up the booklet. Then, she took out a pen and seriously crossed out one of the lines. Since she had done it, she would be at a disadvantage if she did not cross it out. Why should she do something that would be at a disadvantage? Phoenix curled her lips and returned to Buddhism with the booklet. Everything was the same as before. At least it seemed so on the surface. However, only Phoenix knew that once the precepts were broken, the Buddhist power of the scimitar in her hand would be much weaker than before. However, Phoenix still did not understand why that person did such a thing to her. Perhaps it was because he would feel a sense of accomplishment if he overpowered her. Phoenix's fingers tightened, and the scimitar in her palm turned into prayer beads, wrapping around her slender wrist. When she was lying on the clouds, she could even smell the man's scent on her body. This made Phoenix frown heavily. The moment he closed his eyes, he could think of that person. The shadow that he could ignore suddenly became clear at this moment. Phoenix wondered if she should find a chance to take revenge. But on second thought, no matter how they retaliated, the woman would be the one at a disadvantage. Since the other party had such an idea, doing it once should be enough. Phoenix curled her lips mockingly and took out the booklet again. She was somewhat indignant. She hadn't been so domineering as to blow dry the other party's hair and let the other party sleep on her lap. Forget it. He reached out and threw the booklet aside. Phoenix closed her eyes gently as exhaustion washed over her. She dreamt of her childhood again. At that time, she would take the scriptures to recite every day. The little monk walked over and said, "You can't just recite scriptures. You have to accumulate merit. Only then can you become a Buddha. You can't become a Buddha if you go back and forth alone without being with others." Someone pulled the little monk and whispered, "Don't talk nonsense. That person is different from us. She's Phoenix and is destined to become a Buddha." Huh? Can one become a Buddha without accumulating merits? Shoo! Phoenix is different. Also, don't go near her casually. She came from hell and will kill people. Really? She's so beautiful. I can't tell at all. That's just her appearance. I heard that if she gets angry, she can attract all the sins of hell. That's why even the Venerable One doesn't dare to let her do anything. However, the Venerable One also said that such a person is destined to be lonely for the rest of her life. No one will fall in love with her. Everyone gets close to her with ulterior motives. Who asked her to be impure from birth? However, little Phoenix, who heard this, just walked forward quietly. She looked at the floating clouds above her head and laughed. Impure? Ah, who cares? On this day, the Venerable One sitting on the golden lotus caught the sneer on Phoenix's face for the first time. That was a great disrespect to Buddhism as a Buddha. He put his palms together and chanted Amitabha. Buddhism would not tolerate anyone's disdain towards Buddhism. Since she was a person with Buddha's bones, she could not abandon the Buddha's position. Then, let her remember what was fixed. By the time she was completely beaten to a pulp, she would have to yield to him. The Venerable One had always believed in this principle. Therefore, when the man approached Phoenix, he did not stop him, because he never believed that the man was sincere to Phoenix. No matter who it was, they had to go through despair before they could fully understand. What Phoenix needed the most was to have her heart give up. Then, she would truly learn to obey the ethereal heavenly Tao. The man had not woken up yet. His side profile was so handsome that it almost made the world lose its color. Especially when he had a satisfied smile on his face and subconsciously put his arm to the side. It was especially moving. However, what his fingers touched was only the residual warmth of the quilt. The person who was supposed to be sleeping beside him was not there. The man slowly opened his eyes. His long and dangerous eyes immediately narrowed. Then he chuckled. You still can't learn to be obedient like this. As soon as he finished speaking, the bed that was originally safe and sound suddenly shattered into wood dust. Hearing the noise, the immortal who was keeping watch at night hurriedly ran in, wanting to see if there was any demon running out. However, there was no demon. There was only the emperor who was standing in the midst of the ruins. He was holding a woman's undergarment in his left hand. His eyes were dark, and no one knew what he was thinking. The immortal did not dare to go forward. The emperor was originally a kind of evil and cunning character. After he became a god, this kind of character was concealed. However, once he put on a black shawl, his eyes would be dark and deep, as if they were bottomless abyss. The meticulousness of asceticism was vividly displayed on him. There was a kind of languid and decadent aura around him, like snow that had been covered in dust for a long time, making people unable to get close to him. The immortal thought that something must have happened. However, he was confused. Other than Lady Phoenix leaving, what else could have happened? Ah? Could it really be Lady Phoenix? The immortal suddenly realized and hurriedly said, Emperor, before Lady Phoenix left, she asked me to tell you that she is moving back. She probably won't be coming back for a while. Chapter 8:16. She wants to move back? The man chuckled. He glanced at the immortal and pulled the iron chain at the head of the bed over. He threw it aside forcefully. His half-opened black robe was stirred up by his movement. The immortal could clearly see the haze that flashed across the emperor's eyes. What a good way to deal with me. Although the man said so, his eyes were cold. The iron chain under his feet broke into pieces as he walked out. The immortal could not understand. How did moving back become dealing with the emperor? Could it be that the interaction between Lord Phoenix and the emperor was just a show? Now that they found out that they were not compatible, they broke up directly? Sigh, it had only been a few days and they were going to fight again. The immortal shook his head. Before he finished sighing, he saw the emperor, who was walking in front of him, punch the wall. Because of his action, his faintly discernible honey-colored abs became more aggressive. Every inch of them was so perfect that people could not take their eyes off them. She's the first woman to abandon me, said the crown prince. The man laughed again. In the dim light, it was impossible to see the expression on his face. Under the cover of his long black hair, it was gray and cold. The immortal became more and more confused. What did he mean by abandoning me? Why couldn't he understand what the emperor said at all? The man looked up and the playful smile at the corner of his mouth became more obvious. It seems that it is more important to attack the heart. Go and prepare. We are going to Buddhism. Buddhism? Was he going to find Lord Phoenix to settle accounts? The immortal guessed. His eyes widened and he said hesitantly, Emperor, this is not good. Are you going to fight in front of someone's house? The man glanced at him again. Who said that I am going to fight? I am going to recite scriptures to relieve my anger. Oh! The immortal lowered his head and thought that the emperor did not like to recite scriptures before. He would only go once out of 10 times when Buddhism asked him to do so because it was too annoying. Why was he so proactive today? Sigh, as long as he was not going to fight, it was a good thing. The immortal nodded his little head and then ran to send an invitation to Buddhism. The invitation was accepted by Golden Lotus. After all, the people who had read scriptures to the emperor a few days ago were all Golden Lotus. This time, of course, she would be the one to receive the invitation. Golden Lotus also received the news, saying that this time, the emperor took the initiative to come and listen to the scriptures. She asked the little monk to tidy up the meditation room early, and even the scripture that was chosen was the Mahayana Sutra. However, the man did not enter the meditation room. He stopped at the mountainside of Mountain Tenya and looked at the Bodhi tree not far away. He tossed the fish food in his hand and said, Let's chant here. Chanting scriptures here? The expression on Jillian's face froze for a moment. Then she chuckled. The emperor may not know this, but if you want to eliminate the evil spirit, you must have the light of Buddha. We haven't reached the meditation room yet, so I'm worried that chanting sutras won't have any effect. The man smiled and said, I heard that every person who becomes a Buddha has to walk this path in order to complete their merit. Since that's the case, it doesn't matter whether there's Buddha's light on this path or not. It should be able to eliminate the evil spirit. No one refuted him because what the man said was indeed the truth. Golden Lotus smiled gently and did not say anything else. She just asked the little monk to bring the scriptures. The appearance of the emperor made many Buddhist girls who were passing by stop. Just by standing there casually, he was able to attract many gazes. It was as if this person was born with this ability. The little monk who was following Phoenix saw the emperor in front of him and exclaimed, My lord, it's the emperor! Why is he chanting outside instead of going to the meditation room? Phoenix did not even blink. She quietly watered the holy water and put the empty bottle in the little monk's hand. Let's go. There was still a smile at the corner of her mouth, and she reached out to pat the little monk's head. The little monk wanted to take a few more glances at the emperor, but his footsteps were hesitant. They were destined to brush past each other. The man saw Phoenix walking over, and his thin lips curled up. The little monk politely chanted Amitabha. Phoenix nodded her head as usual, which was a form of greeting. The emperor's eyes sank a lot in that instant. Obviously, he did not like Phoenix like this. He always felt that she was like this, not caring about anything. She could start or end things at any time. You don't even dare to open your mouth. It seems that you are afraid of me. The man's provocation was so obvious that even the people around them could hear it. Whether it was the little monk or the Buddhist girls who came to watch, they all looked in their direction. Phoenix stopped and raised her eyebrows at him. Emperor, you are thinking too much. Is that so? The man smiled faintly and leaned over. His voice was close to her ear. How is your body? Does it still hurt? Phoenix's fingers paused. She did not say much and directly went around him. The man's beautiful eyes narrowed. No matter how slow the little monk was, he could see that there was something wrong with these two people. However, the little monk did not understand. Why did they become so hostile? Golden Lotus also saw the atmosphere. She lowered her head and smiled. She raised her head and said to the man, Emperor, Lord Phoenix likes to water the Bodhi tree here. She always likes to be quiet. Let's go to the meditation room and recite scriptures. The little monk looked at the emperor behind him. He reached out and pulled Phoenix's sleeve. Lord, the emperor seems to be very unhappy. Go back. Phoenix only gave the little monk 2 words. She was neither cold nor warm. Just as the little monk responded, he saw the emperor striding towards Phoenix. Under everyone's gaze, he pulled her over, lowered his head slightly, and accurately kissed Phoenix's lips. Everyone couldn't help but take a deep breath. Almost all of the Buddha daughters looked in this direction. Golden Lotus's expression turned completely ugly at that moment. Even the hand that she had reached out was frozen in place. Phoenix's eyes widened. She was still not used to kissing. The tip of her tongue was sucked until it was numb. She felt a burning sensation in her mouth. Her tongue, which was burning with flames, wandered everywhere. Even her back could not help but tremble. She clenched her hands and bit hard with her teeth. The man felt the pain and let go of her. Their lips and teeth were filled with the taste of blood. Not only did the heat not fade away, but it also brought back some messy memories. Phoenix looked at him and said coldly, Is this how the emperor greets people? The man stroked his bleeding lips and looked at Phoenix with his clear eyes. The smile on his face was indescribably evil. The two of them did not look like they had just kissed. It looked like they were going to have a one-on-one fight. Chapter 8:17. Phoenix kept the bottle of holy water in her pocket. She did not take out her hand and just looked at him with her dark eyes. The two of them were not close to each other, but they gave off an indescribable feeling of ambiguity. The long flight of stairs and the same outstanding appearance could easily cause a commotion around them, not to mention these two people who originally represented the heavenly Buddha. I think this is the right way to greet someone who has slept with you for a night and ran away the next day. Emperor looked at her coldly and bent down as he spoke. There was a shadow under his eyes, and even his voice could only be heard by the two of them. Phoenix, didn't anyone tell you that you have to take responsibility after sleeping with someone? Take responsibility? Phoenix frowned. What happened last night should not be my responsibility. Oh, then this highness must have remembered wrongly. You didn't beg this highness to be gentler? The man pinched Phoenix's chin, and the smile on his face was very bewitching. Phoenix, who taught you not to admit your wrongdoings? Phoenix heard him and raised her eyebrows at him. She stretched out her hand and said in a faint voice, You and I both know that if it wasn't for those few mouthfuls of meat, nothing would have happened. Don't tell me that you don't know that I can't eat meat. As her words subsided, Phoenix shifted her gaze away and habitually buried her chin into her kasaya, signifying the end of the conversation. She then walked forward casually, not caring about what would happen next. The man looked at the back of the only red figure in the world of Buddhism, and his eyes darkened. He thought that Phoenix would have a lot of reactions, such as anger or embarrassment, but she did not show any of them. Instead, she was very indifferent. The man threw away the scripture in his hand. For the first time, there was no smile on his face. There was only indifference. His eyes were cold and his thin lips were pursed into a line. His eyebrows were thick and his nose was high. His eyes were full of haze. Golden Lotus wanted to say something to him, but before she could open her mouth, the man had already taken a step forward, and behind him was a group of demons bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. A black aura that kept people away spread out in that instant, and it was almost able to diffuse the heavy Sanskrit Buddhist light. Little Monk kept looking back at the man as he walked. When Phoenix entered the room, he couldn't help but ask, My lord, what happened between you and the Emperor? Why did you become like this all of a sudden? Nothing. After Phoenix finished speaking, she paused for a moment and took out the booklet. She found one of the lines and crossed it out seriously. The small monk leaned forward and took a look. His brows furrowed even tighter as he said, As a tyrannical partner, do we have to have a cold war with the other party? My lord, what is the meaning of this? Human Companion Handbook. Phoenix lowered her head and put the items away. Since she had already broken off relations with the other party, she would be at a disadvantage if she did not add another manual. The small monk rubbed the back of his bald head. He really didn't understand where His Excellency had gotten this thing from. However, looking at the situation today, the next time Emperor came to Buddhism, it would definitely not be as peaceful as before. He felt that he had to appease His Excellency in the future. Otherwise, if they really fought, he would definitely be grounded again. After listening to the small monk's worries, Phoenix was silent for a moment before she said, He won't come again. He won't come again? The small monk widened his eyes and asked, Why? It was because that person's pride would never allow anyone to reject him for the second time, no matter what his purpose of coming was. Moreover, he was just not used to the fact that she was the one who left first after last night. As for the rest, he wouldn't come again. Phoenix answered in her heart. She opened the scripture book in her hand and didn't say anything else. She just lowered her head and recited the scripture. Her side profile was so quiet that it was almost impossible to detect her presence. As Phoenix had expected, Emperor did not come to Buddhism again after that day. The small monk finally felt relieved. He followed behind Phoenix with his short legs. Originally, he wanted to help His Excellency get the mythical water. However, it was strange that after asking 3 immortals of Tiandao, the mythical water was actually sold. Moreover, it was not sold to Buddhism, but to Emperor, who was also in Tiandao and never lacked mythical water. The small monk was stunned. My Excellency, why did Emperor buy so much mythical water? To make me take the initiative to look for him. Phoenix's voice was very faint. She turned around and looked at the small monk. You don't have to look for the next one. We'll go directly to the temple. The result would be the same if they continued to look for him. With that man's means, it was not strange at all that he would do such a thing. As expected, all the mythical water was gathered in one place. The man seemed to have predicted that she would go there. When the immortal saw her, he led her inside. The location was the palace where they stayed at night. Perhaps it was on purpose. He did not remove the chain that she broke that day, but left it in its original place. The man sat on the wooden chair with one hand supporting his chin and his legs crossed. He looked at her with cold eyes, but his voice was smiling. "Phoenix, you should be familiar with this place." The palace of the temple was not accessible to just anyone. Therefore, both the immortal and the small monk were left outside the hall. The man was undoubtedly dangerous, but Phoenix was not afraid. She walked straight to Emperor and narrowed her eyes. "What do you want?" Hearing this, the man tilted his head and smiled. Then he suddenly stood up, grabbed her hand, pulled her over, and threw her on the bed. Then he placed his hands on both sides of her and leaned over. His voice was slightly deeper. "What do you think I want to do?" Their breaths were intertwined. Their chests were moving up and down as if something was about to jump out. Phoenix looked straight at his handsome face and did not avoid him. Her phoenix eyes were very clear. "If you want to do this kind of thing, there should be many people in the Sixth Tao willing to do it with you. Don't look for me, I don't like it." "You really don't like it?" The man lowered his head and asked in a soft voice. His thin lips fell behind her ear. He wanted to kiss her, but his breath was warm and ambiguous. "Your reaction that day was not that you didn't like it." Phoenix subconsciously shrank her neck to avoid his breath, but her body was fixed by him. The man pressed his forehead against hers and began to show his invincible and charming smile, which was enough to warm people's hearts. "Phoenix, do you want to be together for real? Don't you like to do the things in the book? Since you've done what you want to do, why don't we be together for real?" "Be together for real?" Phoenix paused. She looked into the man's eyes that were as deep as the night. Her usually calm breathing actually changed slightly. Chapter 8:18. "I need to think about it." Phoenix pushed him away and stood up. She had her own concerns. The man didn't make things difficult for her. He stretched out his fingers and rubbed her lips. His charming eyes were filled with temptation, and his handsome face was inching closer. Okay. She really couldn't change his mind. She couldn't be persuaded by force or persuasion. However, it didn't matter. She would only be happy when she finally got this kind of person. After coming out of the temple, Phoenix held a lot of holy water in her arms. Little Monk and Little Immortal didn't know what had happened in the palace, but they were surprised that the two people had actually finished their discussion in such a calm and peaceful manner. Weren't they in a cold war? Little Monk couldn't keep up with his Lady Phoenix's thoughts. However, as long as they didn't fight, everything was fine. After all, the Buddhist feast was tomorrow, and this time the Emperor would definitely be invited to the feast. Little Monk's prediction was right. At the feast the next day, the figure of a man appeared as expected. He was wearing a white robe with black hair and an elegant smile. They wanted to get close to him, but they were all blocked by his alienation. Phoenix hadn't thought it through yet, so she didn't sit on the other side. When she entered, the Buddhas and fairies looked at her differently. "It's Phoenix. Sure. I heard that some time ago she moved into the temple. TSK, she moved in without any status. As expected of Lady Phoenix, she thinks differently from us. So what if she moved in? The Emperor has been chanting scriptures with Golden Lotus these days. The Emperor has always liked clean women. I guess he's just playing with those who are too bold. Keep your voices down. That's Phoenix. What's wrong with Phoenix? She can do whatever she wants just because her Buddhist status is high?" Golden Lotus listened to the noise around her, but she didn't stop them. She lowered her head and took a sip of tea. After hesitating for a while, she looked at Phoenix and said, "Lady, don't take their words to heart, but you still need to be careful when you interact with the Emperor in the future. What does she need to pay attention to?" It was the Emperor. His tone was very calm, but those who knew him would know that he was already a little angry at this time. Why do you have to discuss where others go and what they do? The female Buddhas and fairies were stunned by their idol's words. They lowered their heads and looked at their feet, wondering if they had offended him. Golden Lotus raised her head and explained softly, "Emperor, you've misunderstood. We're just worried that Lord Phoenix is too. I don't mind how she does things." The man curled his lips and said casually, "Since the person involved doesn't mind, it has nothing to do with you, right?" Golden Lotus clenched her left hand. When she felt the pain, she smiled and replied, "Of course, as long as you don't mind, Emperor." Phoenix looked at this scene. This was the first time someone had spoken up for her, even though she had always been indifferent to such discussions. So this was what it felt like to have a companion. Phoenix lowered her head and looked at her palm. Then, she looked at the man who had returned to his original position. He was listening to the immortal beside him talk about something. Just the faint smile on his face was enough to make the female Buddhas and fairies steal glances at him. But from what those people said just now, the man should be very careful in that aspect. Thinking of this, Phoenix pulled the fighting Buddha over and said, "Can I ask you something?" What?" "Phoenix, if you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to fight?" The moment you do, the Emperor immediately looked over here. His gaze was so cold. Phoenix thought for a while and decided to ask directly, "Has the Emperor ever had a woman before?" The fighting Buddha looked at Phoenix with a confused expression and said, "Are you a Buddhist or not? You don't know anything about the enemy. Don't you know that the Emperor rarely has any contact with women? It's said that someone wanted to send a woman to his bed, but he broke her ribs and kicked her to the mortal world. I used to wonder if he had a problem in that aspect. Later, I found out that it was because he disliked dirty women. 300 years ago, this matter spread like wildfire in the Six Paths. Didn't you hear about it?" "I know about it." Although Phoenix did not care about gossip, she still knew about important matters. "What I want to ask is, before he obtained the divine position, after becoming a god, one would have fewer emotions, but it was different in the chaotic world." The victorious fighting Buddha rubbed his chin and said, "No, the news I received was that the Emperor's favorite thing to do in the chaos was to kill. He would kill anyone who got close to him. No woman would dare to seek death in front of him. Because of this, the Buddhists wanted to take him in, but they didn't expect him to refuse to convert." Phoenix still remembered the young man who stood in the thunder. Neither the Buddhists nor the gods could do anything to him. However, Phoenix was not concerned about this now. But she opened the book in her hand. It was clearly written on it, "As a domineering and reasonable partner, if it was the other person's first time, you must be responsible for the other person." That man was the first time. Although it did not seem like it, it was indeed the first time. Phoenix frowned and tapped her fingers on the book. She did not eat much of the vegetarian meal. After the Buddhist feast was over, she walked to the man and looked at him calmly. "I have something to tell you." The man did not expect that she would take the initiative to look for him. He followed Phoenix into her wooden house and raised his eyebrows playfully. "Have you thought about the answer?" "Yes." Phoenix opened the book in her hand and said, "I asked someone else, and that person said that it was your first time." The man saw that she was serious and his eyes fell on the words, "domineering and reasonable." He could not help but laugh softly. So, did she misjudge him again? "So I have to be responsible for you." Sure enough, when Phoenix spoke again, her expression was serious. "Let's be together." As a man, it was not right for a woman to be responsible. However, the Emperor was not an ordinary man. Everything he did was based on the result, since the result was as he wished. Of course, he was very calm. "Okay, after being together, how long can you not be tempted, Phoenix?" Just like that, the two of them started a new relationship. Often, one of them played chess while the other read scriptures. The man always hugged Phoenix's waist and taught her how to move the chess pieces to win the game. Gradually, there really was a feeling that the two of them were a couple. In terms of love, compared to the man, Phoenix was relatively naive. Therefore, when the two of them held hands, Phoenix always felt that her heart was not beating like her own. Chapter 8:19. Phoenix had never considered whether it was a good thing for a woman to take the initiative. Since they had decided to be together, they had to treat it seriously. Every day, she would wake up in the man's arms. When she opened her eyes, the vegetarian meal would be ready. It was all her favorite dishes. After the vegetarian meal, the two of them had nothing to do, so they stayed in the temple. He liked to stroke her hair. His slender fingers would stroke her hair, and there was always a smile on his handsome face. Occasionally, he would lower his head to kiss her. Phoenix did not avoid him, but her skills were not as good as his. Her breathing was always messed up, and unknowingly, they would make a mess. It was indescribably intimate. One day, Phoenix did not know why, but she was obsessed with braiding people's hair. She found a silver strand and wrapped it around the man's hair. After she was done, she took out a book and crossed out one of the lines. The man would always laugh when he saw her like this. "How long are you going to play this game?" "Game? Isn't this what all human partners have to do?" Phoenix took out another silver strand. The man smiled but did not say anything. To prevent his black hair from being damaged again, he simply pulled her up. "Let's go. I'll take you to a place." "Where are we going?" Phoenix looked up and asked. The man's lips fell on her eyelids. He smiled slowly. "The demon world. 9,000 feet, blue sky and yellow springs. There was no place that was more beautiful than the demon world. Unlike the dirty and messy hell, this place was filled with alluring and enchanting flowers. Those petals drifted in the air with the wind, and there was a unique fragrance in the air. As soon as Emperor and Phoenix landed, the demons who were originally hiding here automatically retreated 1,000 meters away. Not a single demon dared to appear in front of them, especially Phoenix, although she was not holding a scimitar in her hand. Those demons who often saw her in the demon world hid far away as soon as they smelled the Buddhist fragrance on her body. On the other hand, the Emperor was very elegant in the demon world. When Tiandao was not used to it, he would come to the demon world to drink. Every time, he would make the witches crazy. After all, a man like that, no matter how dangerous he was, would make people uncontrollably want to get close to him. Especially that celestial aura of his that was different from those of the lower realm. It always made people's hearts itch. The demoness's appearances had always been alluring. Their clothes were also different from those of the immortal Tao. Their appearances were gorgeous, and their figures were exquisite. Even the way he looked at others was fiery hot, not hiding his good feelings at all. He didn't have the hypocrisy of the immortal Tao, his eyes always carrying a hint of unwillingness to admit defeat. Logically speaking, it should be easy for them to get it. In fact, there were also people who had confessed to the Emperor. The demoness, who was about to become a Buddha, came to the front of the Emperor without any pretense and said that she had taken a liking to him. At that time, the Emperor just smiled and said playfully, "They really look alike." No one could understand the meaning of his words, because in the next moment, the Emperor seemed to have seen someone and walked out of here. Since then, the Emperor never came again. Not only did he come today, but he also brought a woman with him. And that woman had to be Phoenix, who could kill thousands of demons and become a Buddha immediately. Phoenix didn't like the demon world very much, because every time she came here it was to hunt and kill. And now, it was really not suitable for her to come to the demon world. Because her dharma had not fully recovered, the power of her scimitar was only 1/10 of its original power. "What are you thinking about?" The man looked over and his eyes darkened. He chuckled and bit her ear. "Did I tell you that I don't like it when you're not paying attention in front of me?" Phoenix avoided his action and pointed in front with a smile. "Last time in the demon world, we met there." "No, that wasn't the first time." The man meaningfully pulled her into a cave. Outside the cave was an endless field of red spider lilies. When the breeze blew, it was stunningly beautiful. On the side of the cave there was a mirror. The wood of the mirror was black and engraved with complicated and ancient patterns. Her face was reflected in the mirror. But what surprised Phoenix was that it was the first time she came to the demon world to hunt demons. Turned out that at that time he was also there, but he was drinking at the side, holding a glass of wine in his hand. His thin lips curved into a devilish smile, and there were many witches surrounding him. She didn't notice him at that time, probably because this person liked to hide his aura when he came to the mortal realm. But the way he looked at her, Phoenix's heart skipped a beat and she was about to speak. The man hugged her from behind, his breath hot. When I saw this scene, I only had one thought in my mind. He lifted Phoenix's chin and put his thin lips on hers. If I meet this person again, I will definitely fuck her. Hearing this, Phoenix frowned, and that look made it even more uncontrollable. The man's eyes darkened, and his voice was a little hoarse. His fingers went down her kasaya. Although the two of them said that they were going to be together, they had maintained a simple intimacy during this period of time. They didn't do this again. Phoenix paused, and just as she was about to push him away, her lips were blocked by a deep kiss. The man's pleasant mint smell filled her mouth. This time, it wasn't as simple as just lips on lips. The tip of the man's tongue slowly pried open her teeth and went in little by little. But gradually, his movements began to become more intense, and his breathing became heavier. He firmly held her head and deepened the kiss. He, who was always elegant, was even a little thirsty. As the man kissed her, his fingers rudely rubbed her clothes. His strength was so great that it was a little difficult to resist. Phoenix was touched by him and immediately gasped. Her voice was cold and slightly hoarse, but it was poisonous to the bone. It gently floated in the air, causing the atmosphere to become extremely ambiguous and confusing in an instant. The man looked at the person in his arms. That pair of dark eyes were a little wide at this moment, and her pure black hair was scattered around the side of her ears. She looked more obedient than usual. He felt that he couldn't bear it anymore. No one had ever made him feel like this before. The evil fire in his body rushed toward him, and it was almost about to drown him. He wanted more intense kisses, wanted to get closer, and even wanted to tear the person under him into pieces. The man could clearly feel the agitation in his blood, and the hot feeling came from all directions and finally concentrated in between his legs. Even that place was saying that it wanted her fiercely. It was as if it could no longer suppress that desire. The man opened his mouth and heavily bit the side of Phoenix's ear. Phoenix couldn't help but tremble, and a numbing electric current instantly spread throughout her body. The man's chest was pressed against hers, and under the pressure of gravity, it was excessively hot. This time, Phoenix was conscious. She was sober as she watched herself falling step by step. Chapter 8:20. The relationship between the two of them seemed to be getting better and better. Everyone seemed to know that the Emperor doted on Phoenix, but it was inevitable that someone would want to replace him. The Venerable One sat high on the lotus and summoned Phoenix to the formless realm. Sakya was in seclusion, and the true Buddha had to go through the tribulation of Buddha once every 10,000 years before he could return to his position. Therefore, Phoenix was the one who cleaned up all the sins during this time. This time was no exception. Phoenix held her scimitar and stood in the hall of great strength, where the clouds were flowing. She quietly listened to the great changes in the lower realm. The blood sea of hell is rising again. Phoenix, go this time. Don't fall behind the path of immortality, the Venerable One said as he chanted Amitabha. The true Buddha could only return to his original state when the blood sea was cleared. Phoenix knew this very well. She was always grateful to the true Buddha who brought her from hell to the path of Buddhism. It was because of this gratitude that Phoenix had never refused to carry out every mission she was given. Only this time, Phoenix looked at her scimitar. If it was in the past, she would not hesitate and would immediately go to hell. However, her Buddhist power had not fully recovered, and she wanted to completely clear the blood sea of hell. If she went alone, she would be doomed. Phoenix knew this very well, so she did not go to hell directly. The blood sea was formed by the blood-colored resentment when the most ferocious demons in the world fought each other. To clear the blood sea, one had to kill all the demons, or subdue them like the Emperor. However, subduing them was easier said than done. Those who were not determined enough would easily be devoured. Phoenix wondered if she could borrow the man's divine axe. But when she went to the temple, she found that the man was not there. The immortal guarding the door told her that a witch in the demon world had become an immortal. The heavenly axiom was holding a banquet, and the Buddhists were there to congratulate her. After that, the immortal asked, "Lord Phoenix, didn't the emperor invite you?" Phoenix had never heard of any banquet, but the man did say that he did not like her to appear in public, and it was best to hide her from the beginning. "Since he's not at the temple, I'll go to the heavenly banquet to find him." This matter could not be delayed, so Phoenix did not stay in the temple for long. After the heavenly feast, there were many goddesses sitting in the long clouds. When they saw her, they whispered to each other, "Phoenix still doesn't know? He definitely doesn't know. If he did, he definitely wouldn't be so calm. She's quite pitiful. TSK, TSK. But who would have thought that a witch would have such an affinity with the emperor? They said that they knew the emperor when they were in the demon world. According to the emperor's temperament, he would not like the old when he has a new one. Although the witch is not as beautiful as Phoenix, they are both difficult to tame. It's not strange that the emperor is interested. Phoenix listened to his words and looked up calmly. A woman in a red cloak was standing next to the man. She had a beautiful face and looked a little like a golden lotus. However, she was even more flamboyant. There was a smile in her eyes as she lowered her head and said something to the man. A match made in heaven. It was easy to think of this when seeing these two people. Moreover, they seemed to be very close. Phoenix was stunned for a moment. She did not go forward. She walked to the furthest side of the clouds and hid her presence. The heavenly feast seemed to be ending soon. Since someone was talking to the man, it was not the right time for her to go over. After all, she could not let anyone hear about her borrowing the godly axe. She sat casually on the stone steps and closed her eyes, waiting for the man to walk past. As expected, she heard the sound of the immortals sending him off. Phoenix was about to get up when she heard the crown prince's laughter. "Emperor, there's another witch who likes you. Even the one from Buddhism was taken by you. You win every bet." How boring. The crown prince's words were out of the blue, but Phoenix's fingers froze. She knew that she should leave immediately, or leave as if she had never appeared. However, her legs felt like they were filled with lead. She could not move even half a step. The sigh from Buddhism seemed to appear in her mind again. Phoenix suddenly felt a little tired. However, the voice that reached her ears did not stop. It was so familiar, but at this moment, it made her feel a little cold. "There's nothing that I can't get what I want." The man smiled slightly. His long and narrow eyes were full of colors. His tone was very calm, but the crown prince felt a chill down his spine. It was very creepy. He forced a smile and said, "Phoenix has just forgotten how you looked like when you were young. I'm also a little cold to you when I see you. Do you have to be like this? I know that you've always been a vengeful person. If someone hurts you, you'll definitely pay them back tenfold. However, you want someone to like you and then kick them away. Isn't that a little too cruel? I think Phoenix likes you. How are you going to tell Phoenix that you like this witch who has become a fairy today? What does this have to do with you?" The man laughed. He seemed to be in a very good mood. There was a hint of evil in his eyes, which made people infatuated and confused. Even if they knew that there was a bottomless abyss in front of them, they could not help but jump down and then be smashed to pieces. Phoenix listened to the conversation. Her fingertips trembled as she grasped the stone pillar in front of her. When no one was looking, the corners of her lips slowly curled up. Perhaps it was not a smile, because her eyes were cold. So it was like this. It turned out that she was the only one who was obsessed with that manual. You would think that the other person was also deeply involved. However, in fact, this was a game for him. He could call for a halt at any time, and he could calmly withdraw at any time to see if there would be someone more interesting to him. He originally thought that they were a couple in love, but in fact, she was just one of the people he wanted to conquer. She, who had always been proud, had actually become the biggest fool in the world. When she was panting in his arms, gently hugging him and listening to his heartbeat, he was probably thinking that he had been captured so easily. In fact, when she thought about it carefully, Did he ever say that he liked her? No. Everything was clear now. Everything could be seen clearly now. However, at that moment what he won was not only her dignity. She also placed her hands in front of him, holding it in her palms and handing it to him, a proud heart. Phoenix closed her eyes again. Her heart was still hurting, but she did not care and rubbed it. Chapter 8:21. Her throat felt like it was burning and her head was spinning. Phoenix suddenly remembered a sentence she read when she didn't know what love was. The sentence went like this: "No matter how much I've walked hand in hand with you, how many times I've touched you, and how many crazy things I've done for you, you're still so calm when you mention me after we've separated. The one whose eyes turn red without saying anything is me, not you. Perhaps love was just a game. Whoever got serious first would lose." Phoenix smiled and stood alone in the same spot. Took her a long time to calm down. The gods and fairies in the distance were still talking and laughing. Clouds and mist surrounded them. The scenery was beautiful and charming. Phoenix saw the witch who had just become a god. She smiled and walked back to Buddhism step by step without saying a word. Above the third heaven, nothing had changed. Little Monk ran over to ask where Phoenix had gone. He kept nagging her along the way. There was no time for Phoenix to be sad. Emptying the sea of blood could not be delayed. Little Monk followed behind her and said in a low voice, "My lord, the Venerable has looked for you twice. He asked when you planned to go to hell." Phoenix reached out and watered the Bodhi tree. She did not stop at all. "I'll go after watering it. Also, the Emperor sent someone to give you your favorite osmanthus cake. He said that he wanted to ask you what kind of vegetarian meal you would like to have tonight." Little Monk held up the mythical water strenuously. "The Emperor should not know that my lord is going to hell, right?" Phoenix did not answer his question. She just squatted under the Bodhi tree and watered the water quietly. Her expression was very calm. Little Monk almost suspected that Lord Phoenix did not hear what he said at all. Just as Little Monk was about to say it again, Phoenix said in a low voice, "I'm not going." What did she mean by not going? She was not going in the future? Little Monk's face was filled with confusion. Before he could react, Phoenix stood up and casually tied up her waist-length black hair. In an instant, the prayer beads wrapped around her hand turned into a scimitar with a cold gust of wind. The reflection of her Kasaya battle robe was like a raging fire. The Phoenix was undoubtedly beautiful. Her long hair fell to the ground like a waterfall, and her snow-white clothes bloomed in all directions. She was like a water lily that had bloomed for 1,000 years. Her eyes flowed like water, and she was the most beautiful face in the world. Such a face should not have belonged to a Buddhist because it was too ostentatious and inappropriate. However, Phoenix was such an existence. Even if she was badly injured, she would never throw away the demon-slaying machete in her hand, just like how she would never bend her back when she stood straight. In the 80,000-foot blood sea of hell, rotten flesh emitted a foul stench. Demons roared in the blood sea, not fearing the Buddha's light at all. Surrounded by malicious ghosts, Phoenix stood in the air. The huge and beautiful machete in her hand flapped in the wind. Even so, those malicious ghosts who liked to take advantage of loopholes smelled something wrong with her. "Ha ha ha, you want to clear the blood sea with such a weak Buddha's light? Buddha's Phoenix is just SOSO. The ghost sneered. The stench of the blood sea surged in from all directions. Demonic ghosts pounced on Phoenix one after another. Buddhists are most particular about the purity of the six senses. What immortal Phoenix? She even has feelings. How can she clear the blood sea? Today is the day you die." The malicious ghost wrapped around Phoenix's leg, vaguely wanting to invade her body. The weak Buddha's light was swallowed up bit by bit. Just as the malicious ghost was about to open its mouth and bite Phoenix's throat, Phoenix suddenly stopped in midair. Phoenix suddenly stopped in midair. The scimitar in her hand pierced through her left shoulder. The blood of the Phoenix was like the fire of the 9 levels of heaven, able to extinguish all sins. The malicious ghosts widened their eyes in shock. They watched as the person stood in the sky, stepping on the churning blood sea. She reached out and slowly pulled out a bloody phoenix's bone from her body. Then she transformed it into a machete in her hand. Her fair fingers were stained with golden blood. In the next second, she leaned over and nailed the malicious ghost in the blood sea with one strike of the machete. In the loud sound of the earthquake, countless malicious ghosts were sucked into the ground in an instant before they could even show their heads. She actually pulled out her own Buddha's bone. The malicious ghosts screamed in shock. The tsunami caused by the earthquake covered the sky and the sun. The malicious ghosts screamed and tried to turn around and escape. However, Phoenix did not seem to hear them. In the midst of blood, her 5 fingers burst open like 1,000-year-old ice, cutting through the wind and breaking the waves. The top-level malicious ghosts exploded into a magnificent blood flower that stretched for thousands of miles. She held the machete in her hand and blood dripped down from her fingertips. The golden Buddha's light emitted by the phoenix's bone suddenly split the 9 levels of heaven and 10 levels of hell like a sharp sword, completely shrouding the 4 evils under the boundless Buddha's voice. From now on, there was no blood sea in hell. After the massacre, Phoenix put away her machete. With her right hand on her shoulder, she dragged herself back to Buddhism step by step. Little Monk had never seen Phoenix in such a sorry state before. Every time she went out to battle, she would return victorious. However, this time, even her hair was stained with blood. It was as if she would fall down if she took one more step. However, she always had a faint smile on her face, and her body was straight as a pencil. Those who were too bloody were not allowed to enter the Hall of Great Strength. Therefore, Phoenix could only stay outside the house. The best place was under the Bodhi tree. Only there, no one would despise her for being evil. Phoenix leaned against the tree tiredly. The pain from the Buddha's bone made her exhale a long breath. Wushuang, it's okay. It won't hurt anymore soon. Yes, it won't hurt anymore soon. Phoenix closed her eyes. On the top of the 33 levels of heaven, she was like a tired bird returning to its nest. She closed her eyes and slept for the whole afternoon. She, who was covered in blood, refused to be accepted by Buddhism. She could only use the most ineffective method to heal herself. The blood on her shoulder overflowed again and again. Even though she was an immortal bird, she still knew what pain was. That day, the wind from the Bodhi tree was warm. After being stained with blood, the Bodhi tree learned a feeling that he had never felt before. That feeling was called heartache. Phoenix's Buddha's aura was getting weaker and weaker. It was so low that he was almost worried. However, he could only be a Bodhi tree and quietly watch everything happen. Later on, the 33 levels of heaven, the true Buddha returned to one. In the heavy snow, the Bodhi tree knelt on the 9,000 steps one after another. The Buddha asked the Bodhi tree, "What wish do you want to make?" He turned into a human and said, "I want to keep her safe and sound for 100 years. The clearing of the blood sea was the most joyous event for the 6 paths. This clearing was different from the last time the emperor went to hell. There would be no evil spirits in the blood sea for 500 years. Of course, the Buddhists would hold a banquet to celebrate. They would celebrate the merit of delivering all living beings from torment, and also celebrate the victory of the Buddhists over the heavenly axiom." When the emperor heard the news, his first reaction was to frown. Phoenix went to the blood sea. Chapter 8:22. Yes, Emperor, you don't know. Lord Phoenix is so impressive this time. She even flattened the blood sea. The immortal said enviously, "I heard that there won't be any evil spirits in the blood sea for the next 500 years. She can really be considered as delivering all living beings from torment." The man's eyes narrowed as he listened. She flattened the blood sea? The man was someone who had been to the 4 evils. Even his birth was transformed from chaos, so he was very familiar with the blood sea. It was not as easy to flatten the blood sea as the people around him said. Except for the true Buddha, who used his own body to deliver all the evil spirits from hell. He swore that he would not become a Buddha until the blood sea was emptied. Only then did he manage to redeem the spirits. Other than that, no one from Tiandao or Buddhism had ever flattened the blood sea. Although he had the ability to do so, the man did not know that Phoenix could do it too. Thinking of this, the man looked up and ordered in a faint voice, "Go to Buddhism and send a message, then bring Phoenix here." The message was sent yesterday. Lord Phoenix said she won't be coming. The immortal replied in a low voice, "She's probably preparing for the Buddhist feast." The man's fingers paused, but he did not say anything else. She had just returned from hell, so she would definitely be busy. In the beginning, he did not notice anything wrong. On the third day, the message was sent out, but it was always rejected. The man went to Buddhism personally and asked the little monk in a low voice, "Did something happen to your lord?" The little monk shook his head and blinked his big eyes. "No, but she likes to recite scriptures under the Bodhi tree recently. She doesn't go out much." Reciting scriptures under the Bodhi tree? The man repeated this sentence. His deep eyes gradually turned cold. Then he smiled. "Go and ask your lord. When does she plan to go to Tiandao for a vegetarian meal after reciting scriptures?" The little monk realized that the atmosphere was not right, so he said hesitantly, "That emperor, Lord said that she won't be going anymore." "What do you mean she won't be going anymore?" The man smiled slowly, and the clouds in the sky seemed to float because of his cold and angry smile. Little monk didn't know what to say, but he was worried that the emperor would get angry. If the emperor got angry, then it wouldn't be good. The immortal behind the man also had the same thought. He quickly handed over the lunchbox in his hand and tried to smooth things over. "Little master, this is the vegetarian food that the emperor specially made for Lord Phoenix to nourish her body. Since Lord Phoenix is reciting scriptures and it's not convenient for us to enter, please pass on a message to Lord Phoenix so that she won't starve." "But Her Excellency didn't even allow me to go there. She hasn't eaten vegetarian meals for several days. She has been in the forbidden area of the third heaven. Other than watering the Bodhi tree, she hasn't spoken a word to anyone. Even at the Buddhist feast 2 days ago, Her Excellency." While the little monk was still talking, he saw the imperial emperor's long sleeves brushing past, sweeping the plate full of vegetarian dishes to the ground. Amidst the crashing sound, the imperial emperor stood up straight. His robes fluttered on the ground, and a frightening black aura surged behind him. No one dared to stop him. He was leading a group of demons and devils. Even the Buddhists didn't dare to confront him face to face. Walking through the misty stairs, the jade-like lake surrounded a huge Bodhi tree. Under the tree lay a familiar figure. She leaned her head on the branch of the Bodhi tree and closed her eyes gently. Her long black hair spread beside her body, and her snow-white clothes bloomed in all directions. However, she didn't notice at all. It was as if the Bodhi tree was the only thing left in her eyes. Her peaceful face was full of peace, as if the Bodhi tree was the only thing she could rely on in the world. Once again, she put him aside and turned a deaf ear to him. The man's cold eyes lost even more warmth, and even his voice sank. "This is the reason why you haven't seen me for a few days? Is it to water your beloved Bodhi tree?" Hearing this, Phoenix opened her eyes and looked in his direction. She didn't expect the man to appear again. It probably had something to do with her clearing the sea of blood, and he had a renewed interest in taming her. Or maybe he thought that she hadn't taken the initiative to contact him for a few days, and he thought that she hadn't been completely broken by him. No matter what it was, Phoenix didn't want to think too much now, and didn't say anything. She just waved her hand. A bronze mirror fell directly into the hands of the emperor. It was a shrunken magic mirror, made by the man and placed in the demon world. It could record a lot of things. The two of them once said that they wanted to create a lot of memories and store them in this mirror. Now that she thought about it, when she woke up, she would feel a chill in her heart. Should she blame herself for being too proactive? Just like what others said, a woman who was too proactive would not be cherished under normal circumstances. But if she could do it all over again, she would still do it the same way. However, her pride didn't allow her to be so embarrassed. In the past few days, she had also heard people mention that the witch had gone to the temple. The two of them were probably like this. In fact, it was quite boring. From the beginning they didn't see eye to eye, and then to the agreement book. Was it because he was too lonely that he would hand himself over so casually? If that was the case, then let's go our separate ways. Phoenix coughed softly. Her left arm still hurt, so she didn't want to get up. The man looked at her, and his beautiful eyes narrowed little by little. What are you doing? I'm returning it to you. When Phoenix curled her lips into a smile, she was still as lazy as before. Emperor said that what he hated the most was seeing her in different look. That's why I asked you, what are you doing? We've been together for a while. Phoenix half bent her long legs. According to your habits, it's time to break up. Emperor sneered. I don't know what habits I have. If you want to quarrel, you have to find a decent excuse. I don't want to quarrel, that's boring. Phoenix leaned against the Bodhi tree and laughed. During the few days when their relationship was good, it wasn't that the two of them didn't quarrel, and they often kissed while talking. But this time, they both knew that this quarrel was different from the past, because they had never said that they wanted to break up with each other. Phoenix smiled and continued. It's just that it's time for us to break up. It's almost time. Emperor's handsome face darkened. He pulled Phoenix up, and there was a smile on his thin lips. His fingers that were pinching her were pale because he was squeezing her too hard. Do you know what you're saying? Chapter 8:23. Of course I know. Isn't it just a game that I'm no longer interested in and is about to end? You've said those words before. Phoenix looked at the man. Her beautiful eyes were like a whirlpool, without a trace of emotion. Emperor sneered. His face was extremely gloomy and his fingers were clenched tightly by his side. A game? No interest? Then what are you interested in? The Bodhi tree outside the door? Who do you think I am? Do you think I'll allow you to come and go as you please? If you think that you'll feel uncomfortable if I say that we're going to separate, you can say that. Phoenix also smiled, but the curve of her lips was slightly pale. Emperor's fingers tightened even more, as if he was going to crush her shoulder bones. However, that arrogant and handsome smile never changed. Do you really want to separate from me so badly? It's time, isn't it? Phoenix's voice was very calm. You've been on the battlefield for a long time. You should know that you'll get tired of it after a long time. Emperor's lips curled. His low voice was like the calm before the storm. I didn't know that you'd get tired of this kind of thing after a long time. Since we're going to separate, then there's nothing to worry about. A tearing sound was heard. Phoenix's kasaya was completely torn to pieces. The man pressed her against the wooden door and kissed Phoenix's lips fiercely. Without the gentle expression on his face, he was like a wild beast that had gone berserk. Her soft lips were bitten and bleeding. Her tongue was also numb from being sucked. Phoenix didn't move away or avoid him. She only looked at him coldly. His biting moved all the way down her neck, leaving a large and terrifying mark on her body. Everything in the room broke into pieces. The crackling noises made the immortal standing outside the door become anxious. Emperor, what's wrong? Did something happen? What he was most worried about was that the two of them would fight. Get lost. The man threw a cold word at him with endless murderous intent. The immortal immediately retreated a few meters. Even his chest hurt from the impact. He had never seen the celestial emperor so angry before. That person had always been elegant and courteous. Even when he was killing someone, he was always smiling. But now, even the sky around them seemed to be changing. There was no foreplay. Phoenix never knew that such a thing could be so painful. The aggressive invasion continued for a long time. The emperor, who seemed to be venting something, used all kinds of methods to torture the person under him. Phoenix didn't say anything. Gradually, an indifferent smile appeared on his face. She thought that was good. At least she was still conscious. If he was too gentle, she would not be able to stop herself from calling his name. In that case, she would appear even more lowly and laughable in front of him. She had always naively thought that it was enough for a man to have her. Since she was devoted to him, he should be devoted to her as well. But she had forgotten. This person was unruly from beginning to end. No one in this world could restrain him. The heavenly Tao and the Buddhist Tao could not, and neither could emotions. He had always followed the principle of physical pleasure and took conquest as his interest. Things that could be conquered too quickly would lose their fun for him. Perhaps it was because he was tired. She was so easily conquered by him. Of course, he would find someone else to change his appetite and challenge more interesting and exciting things. In fact, it didn't matter to him who the other party was. Phoenix understood all of this. Thinking about it carefully, this man had never said that he liked her. He had never even said a word of love to her. He only said that he wanted to be with her. She couldn't blame others for not understanding the rules of the game. But her pride didn't allow her to share the person she loved with anyone else. Since there was no love between them, it was better to separate. Whose fault was it? She thought that he liked her, so she asked him to be devoted to her. If she didn't have extravagant hopes, she wouldn't be as disappointed as she was now. It was just a game. Because Phoenix clearly knew how painful it was when the tenderness of deceiving oneself was broken. The man finally stopped, but he refused to withdraw from her. He just held her in his arms. His strength was so strong that she thought he would break her. They were in a stalemate for a long time. There was a suffocating silence. Phoenix was so tired that she couldn't say a word. Every expression on her face said it all. "We're finished." She forced herself to stand up, but he picked her up and placed her on the clouds. At this time, Phoenix didn't argue with him. She was really too tired. Her Buddhist aura was so weak that she even wondered if she was the legendary immortal bird. Maybe it was because she couldn't die no matter what. That was why he sent her to eliminate sins time and time again, because he thought that she wouldn't get hurt. He thought that she was cold and hard to tame, so he started a game called love. But she was really too tired. She thought of herself seriously writing the booklet, and when she crossed out all the rules on the rice paper, she felt that the scene was very silly. But fortunately, she tactfully left. She didn't care whether the man was still there. Phoenix closed her eyes and wanted to rest. It was drizzling outside the ninth heaven, and the room became a little cold. In a daze, Phoenix heard the man calling her name in a hoarse voice and asking her, "Why?" That damp and low voice sounded like the sad cry of an injured beast. Phoenix didn't understand. She was the one who was in pain, but why did it seem like he was the one who was hurt the most? She opened her eyes and realized that she was just thinking too much. There was no sign of the man beside her. This was very much like the man's style. If he was completely convinced, he wouldn't look back. Phoenix couldn't help but smile softly. Her lips were extremely pale. This was good, because there was no need to continue. She should have understood long ago. But she was more clear-headed now. It was still raining outside the house. Dripping, dripping, dripping onto the folded umbrella. Under the Bodhi of Buddhism, the man just stood there motionlessly. No one knew what he was thinking. The immortal followed behind him in fear and trepidation. "Emperor, should we go back to the temple or continue chanting scriptures?" In his opinion, the emperor should go back to chanting scriptures. In this way, the demons behind him would follow suit and cause wind and rain. Everywhere was dark. The man didn't speak. Even half of his shoulders were wet. He didn't have the slightest reaction. The immortal even suspected that the emperor didn't hear what he said. But the immortal didn't understand why the emperor kept standing there and refused to leave. Just when the immortal thought that the emperor was going to turn into stone, he said in a hoarse voice, "We're not going anywhere. Let's go to the heavenly feast." Chapter 8:24. The immortal had never heard such a voice from the emperor. It was as if there was a tinge of wetness in his voice. Subconsciously, the immortal looked in the direction of the man, but he didn't see anything except for his pale fingers. There was almost nothing strange about the emperor. Even when he went to the heavenly feast, he curled his lips into a faint smile and allowed the singing and dancing below to be peaceful. It was as if he had returned to his old self. When he went to the Buddhist temple to listen to the chanting of Buddhist scriptures, there was always someone beside emperor. It was never a lack of fun. It was just that the witch, who had just become a celestial, followed him most of the time. The immortal didn't know what was going on. He was afraid that Lord Phoenix would be angry if she saw him. However, the celestial emperor seemed to be doing it on purpose. Of all the paths, he just had to choose that small path. In fact, every time they passed by Phoenix's door, the door was always closed. The door was always closed, and it was not until the third day that they saw each other face to face. However, Lord Phoenix's expression didn't change at all. She looked lazy and indifferent. Although she didn't speak when she saw people, she didn't seem rude. It was as if she didn't care who appeared. Most of the time, she sat under the Bodhi tree with a scripture spread out on her lap. From time to time, she would turn her head to see how the Bodhi tree was growing. She looked calm and occasionally said something softly, as if she was talking to the Bodhi tree or to herself. They weren't far apart. The immortal felt that Lord Phoenix must have seen Emperor and the witch. However, it was strange that she didn't react at all. The witch laughed. It's said that Lord Phoenix of Buddhism doesn't care about anyone except for the Bodhi tree. Now it seems that the rumor is true. Very few people are willing to water the Bodhi tree with divine water. The Bodhi tree can't transform into a human. If it could, it would be fate for Lord Phoenix to stay with it for hundreds of years. However, Lord Phoenix doesn't seem to care whether the Bodhi tree can take shape or not. It's as if she's happy as long as she can stay by its side. How enviable. It's a pity that Lord Phoenix is the head of all Buddhas and is devoted to Buddhism. She probably won't fall in love with anyone. Otherwise, Lord Phoenix would really look like she has fallen in love with Bodhi. The man did not speak, but his smile was deeper than usual. It was so cold that it was somewhat dazzling. Devoted to Buddha? She's not as obedient as she looks. Leaving behind such a baffling sentence, the man left. The wind that he brought out was a little stinging to her face. The immortal only felt that the relationship between the Emperor and Lord Phoenix had become strange, but he didn't know what the problem was. On the other hand, the witch, who was standing at the side, smiled faintly. The gentleness in her eyes was clearly the appearance of golden lotus. It turned out that long before the golden lotus transformed into a human, she already had 6 senses and 7 thoughts. One of the thoughts came from the Emperor, and he fell into the demon world. It was precisely because her primordial spirit was a golden lotus that she was able to achieve positive results in her cultivation and become an immortal in just a short 100 years. When she was in the world of Buddhism, she already knew what kind of woman the Emperor was interested in. It was not because of anything else, but because when Phoenix was hunting, she didn't notice the Emperor's figure at all. While drinking, he looked at Phoenix. From then on, Golden Lotus knew that in order to attract a man's attention, she had to be different. That was why she confessed to the man in such a straightforward manner in front of everyone. This was the only way that the man would remember her. In fact, what Phoenix did was just the same as what she did. She used the method of loosening the reins in order to get closer to him. However, Phoenix was a fool. She didn't understand that no matter how stubborn a woman was, she had to learn to give in. Moreover, Golden Lotus had always believed that the easier it was to convince something, the faster it would be for a man to let go. In the beginning, Phoenix had the upper hand. However, later on, she took the initiative in everything, which probably made the man feel that it was meaningless. Golden Lotus smiled gently. With the appearance of a witch, no one would notice her wherever she went. Because even the Venerable One didn't know about the evil appearance she gave birth to in hell, the news of Emperor and Phoenix's separation spread quickly in the 6 realms. People didn't seem to be surprised. During the heavenly feast, they held their wine glasses and drank one mouthful after another. It was just a joke. What did I say? The 2 of them will separate sooner or later. Emperor won't be nice to anyone forever. Moreover, the Emperor didn't like women like Phoenix. I guess it's because Phoenix is too difficult to get close to, so the Emperor wants to give it a try. How do you know? You're not the Emperor. Isn't it obvious? Phoenix's appearance and temperament were indeed rare in this world, but she was a little too cold. Which man didn't like a softer woman? Just like Phoenix, she could even fill up a sea of blood without blinking an eye. Who knows when she would stab someone in the back? Such a woman was generally ruthless, and it would be comfortable to be with her. She's not like that who just became an immortal. She knows when to be strong and when to be soft. Only women like her know how to please men. Come on, you're making Phoenix sound so bad. I wonder who was the one who wanted to marry Phoenix. It's true that I like Phoenix. However, a woman like Phoenix is still all right from afar. If you really want me to be with her all day long, I will also feel bored. A woman like her should have one or two tender qualities. Who would like someone who only knows how to fight and kill? I'm sure the Emperor would also feel that there is no novelty in being apart from her. Hey, stop talking. She's here. Who's here? Phoenix. As soon as these two words were uttered, the people at the heavenly feast immediately shut their mouths and looked behind them. Sure enough, they saw a figure slowly walking over from not far away. She was stepping on clouds. Unlike the other women, Phoenix wasn't dressed up. She was still wearing her kasaya, black hair, and white robes. Buddhist prayer beads were wrapped around her slender, fair wrist, and a cape that fluttered in the wind was draped over her shoulders. It was as red as a wildfire. She had a tall figure, long legs, and a sense of purity in her arrogance. Just by standing there, she gave people a strong impression of a picture. It was undeniable that every time Phoenix appeared, she would amaze people. This woman was just like that. She exuded a sense of handsomeness from inside out. It was as if no matter what happened, she was the only existence in the world, and she wouldn't bend even a little bit. This immediately made those meticulously dressed female Buddhas and fairies pale in comparison. Because no one could deny that Phoenix's beauty was cultivated from a young age. That kind of attitude was integrated into her every move, and no one could compare to her. However, even if that was the case, so what? She was still dumped by the Emperor. Now, everyone in the Six Paths knew how unrestrained Phoenix was. Chapter 8:25. However, they did not understand. Phoenix had not left the house for more than 10 days. Why would she agree to participate in the heavenly feast today? Soon, the deities came to a realization. Perhaps she was here to reconcile with the Emperor? Thinking of this, many of the fairies raised their heads, looking like they were waiting for a good show. After a while, the Emperor arrived with the witch beside him. Nothing had changed. He sat on the seat of honor in his purple and white robe. His pair of peach blossom eyes were exceedingly beautiful, but he never looked in the direction of Phoenix. The fairies could not help but feel happy. Sure enough, the Emperor was tired of Phoenix. In the future, when Phoenix came to the heavenly Tao, she would not be so self-righteous. Phoenix was not a member of the heavenly Tao, but because of her position as a Buddha, she was always one step ahead of them. Her seat was also closer to the Emperor. Today, although the two of them were not sitting far from each other, they felt like they were thousands of miles apart. How could they not be surprised? Although they could not have anything to do with the Emperor, they felt good to see Phoenix being humiliated. This heavenly feast was arranged by the Crown Prince of the Heavenly Tao, but they did not know what the host was doing. However, this did not matter. After all, there was nothing more interesting than embarrassing Phoenix. The fairies who usually did not dare to provoke Phoenix looked at each other and smiled at the seat of honor. Emperor, Lord Phoenix has already put aside her pride to reconcile with you. Why are you still so cold? Yes. There were also those who did not understand the situation and sincerely hoped that the two of them could reconcile. It's normal for two people to quarrel when they're together. Emperor, since Lord Phoenix is here, it means that she intends to apologize. When the man heard this, his fingers that were holding the wine glass paused. He looked at Phoenix and laughed. She is only here to participate in the heavenly feast. You are thinking too much. Was he not willing to reconcile? The fairies looked at each other and the smiles on their faces became even brighter. From beginning to end, Phoenix only listened quietly. She leaned on her seat and did not speak. Emperor's gaze fell on her face as he raised the wine glass in his hand. Phoenix didn't avoid it at all. Instead, she replied with a meaningful look. She didn't show off her abilities, but she was indifferent and somewhat distant. Emperor Huang looked at her movements, and his smile deepened. You haven't gone out for more than 10 days. Are you afraid that you will feel uncomfortable when you see me? Phoenix was familiar with the man's style of speaking. It was just that he lacked gentleness and was used to hitting the nail on the head. Why aren't you talking? Staring straight at Phoenix, Emperor's beautiful peach blossom eyes were as deep as the sea, deep and cold. Phoenix put down the wine glass in his hand and looked at him with a smile. You haven't changed. The Emperor responded vaguely. His excessively handsome face had an evil aura. Phoenix stood sideways, very close to the man, with a handsome smile on his face. But I've changed. Because of one sentence from you, I've been sad for a long time. I've changed. As soon as she finished speaking, she stood up and said in a faint voice, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. The man paused, and the wine glass in his hand rippled. His gaze was very heavy, so heavy that even the things on the table trembled slightly. Phoenix didn't look at the person behind her. She walked past him and was about to take a step forward when her wrist was suddenly grabbed, and she was pulled back forcefully. He gripped her tightly and stood behind her. His thin lips opened. I agree. Agree to what? Phoenix frowned. The man looked at her and lowered his voice. Get back together. Let's pretend that what happened that day never happened. Let's get back together. Get back together? Phoenix raised her eyes to look at him. Everyone present didn't expect that Emperor would really agree to get back together with Phoenix. I really didn't expect that Emperor would actually agree. Maybe it's because Phoenix's behavior just now was too cold, which made Emperor more interested. I don't know about that, but it's the first time I've seen a woman rushing to get back together with someone. Sounds of discussion could be heard from all around. Phoenix didn't say anything, but she suddenly felt that it was a little funny. Maybe it was because she was too unreserved in the past, which caused everyone to misunderstand her. Even the man misunderstood her and thought that she wanted to get back together with him. Phoenix had never regretted any of the decisions she made. When she loved someone, she was vigorous and didn't care about the consequences. Even if she was really hurt, it was because of her own actions. Under the circumstances that she didn't hurt anyone, it wasn't a crime to not be reserved. Even if she was labeled as indecent, she was still herself. Just get back together? She had never thought of it this way. The moment she was pulled out of the sea of blood, she woke up from the pain. Because she knew that in this world, she could only rely on herself. This was related to her destiny. Phoenix of Buddhism was born to kill, and anyone who got close to her had a purpose. Making her submit was just one of the purposes. Phoenix had never been like this before. She was tired of arguing and everything. Maybe in the eyes of others, she was a woman who would cling on to a man. Phoenix rested her head on her hand and laughed. These people were too imaginative. I'm here this time because... Phoenix was just about to speak when a slightly evil voice came from not far away. It was very cynical. Everyone, I'm really sorry that I'm late. Hey, Phoenix, you're here so early? Actually, there's no need to wait in advance. Here, this is the mythical water that I've saved. Just remember to give me the number of Buddha beads. Thank you. Phoenix took the mythical water and smiled gently. It's been a little difficult to find mythical water recently. You don't have to worry about the Buddha beads. The 72 will be enough. Crown Prince laughed again. You're really attentive to that Bodhi. To be honest, I've never seen anyone who takes care of flowers and plants like you. Bodhi is not an ordinary flower and plant. Phoenix's voice was very faint. Only she knew that if it was not for the weak light of Buddha emitted by the Bodhi that day, she would not have been able to hide her embarrassment. For 3 whole days, the pain of the Buddha bone was so painful that she did not even have the strength to take care of herself. Because of the blood all over her body, she was abandoned by Buddhism. Fortunately, she had the Bodhi that grew up with her. So, you're here today just to get the mythical water? The man laughed in a low voice and interrupted the conversation between Phoenix and Crown Prince. I misunderstood you, right? Chapter 8:26. Under the lamplight, the smile on the man's face could charm any girl. However, his eyes gradually turned cold. Phoenix looked at him and pushed his hand away. She thought for a moment and said, "You don't like pestering people. In fact, I don't like pestering people either, so I won't do those things. Since the misunderstanding is cleared, I'll leave first." Hearing this, the people realized that Phoenix wasn't here to reconcile with the Emperor, but to get the mythical water. The Emperor smiled evilly and leaned forward suddenly. His thin lips almost fell on her ear, and his words were cold and cruel. "You care so much about that Bodhi tree. Will it die if you go back later? You're right, we don't like pestering people." After saying this, the man raised his hand and threw the wine glass on the ground with a bang. He turned around and left. The immortal quickly followed. The cold wind hit his body and his fingers were a little cold. Everyone present was frightened by the Emperor's appearance. Even the crown prince couldn't help but frown. For some reason, the man's evil aura was getting stronger and stronger. This was not good news for the heavenly Tao, because no one could be sure that he would return to his previous state and kill whoever he didn't like. Perhaps it was because the man had been in the heavenly Tao for too long. He had been in the heavenly Tao since the beginning. So people had long forgotten that this elegant and perfect man was actually more cold-blooded and ruthless than anyone else. If he was displeased, even the crown prince didn't know what he would do. "Emperor," the immortal behind the man hesitantly raised his hand. "Since Lord Phoenix already has the mythical water, what about this bottle of mythical water?" The man paused and his voice became a little hoarse. "Throw it away." "Yes." The immortal's voice became softer and softer. "What about this mirror?" The man didn't speak. The immortal wanted to throw it away on his own accord, but he was afraid that the Emperor would get angry again. Outsiders didn't know that in the past few days, everyone in the temple was trembling with fear. The Emperor's current thoughts were becoming more and more unfathomable. The man turned around and looked at the magic mirror. A scene immediately appeared on the water-like mirror. She was holding a booklet and drawing with her head lowered. He hugged her from behind and held her hand with his fingers. She had never been very obedient. After being hugged by him for a long time, she lazily pushed him away and ordered him to prepare vegetarian food. Phoenix was the only one in this world who could order him around. Ever since she ate meat, her appetite had been bad. She would only eat more when he personally supervised her every time. Sometimes she would be annoyed. It was not that the two of them had never quarreled before. After all, neither of them would admit defeat. However, no matter how fierce the argument was, the two of them would end up laughing together. After all, his Phoenix was very obedient. Other than the fact that she didn't like to be tied up, she would follow him wherever he wanted to go. This made Emperor feel that she had to have him. But who would have thought? There would also be a day when he would be dumped. When she threw the magic mirror at him, his heart sank. When he asked her what she was doing, she smiled. Once you lose interest in a game, there's no need to continue. You've been on the battlefield for a long time. Don't you know that you'll get sick of it after a long time? He felt as if he had been hit in the head with a stick. He looked at the calm Phoenix in front of him. This prideful and inexperienced person really wanted to leave him, but he couldn't catch her. He didn't even know how to catch her. He could only subconsciously hug her tightly and hold her shoulders. His actions were so crazy that it was as if he wanted to merge the two of them completely. If he could control himself, if his temper was better, he wouldn't hurt her. But he couldn't control himself. To her, was it just a game between them? She didn't say anything. She quietly let him hug her as if nothing had happened. When she closed her eyes, she always looked so obedient, just like an obedient child. But he clearly knew that she wasn't a child. She had her own thoughts. Between them, it was over. His heart felt as if it was being kneaded back and forth by an invisible hand. It was so twisted that even his breathing was a little irregular. It was so painful that he almost suffocated. He didn't have many chances to experience it in his life. But that day he experienced it countless times. His emotions fluctuated, fell, and finally calmed down. There was a burst of emptiness. She fell asleep because she was too tired, but he didn't sleep for the entire night. He hated that she could say those words so easily, so he kept bringing people to Buddhism, just like a childish child who wanted to get other people's attention. He also clearly felt her displeasure and coldness. Hearing the discussions around him, he really thought that she was here to get back together with him. The corner of his mouth couldn't hide the smile. This news was probably the happiest news for him in a while. But after waiting for a while, she still didn't say anything. Instead, she stood up and wanted to leave. Instinctively, he wanted to say something to make her stay. Yes, make her stay. It didn't matter even if he had to put down the pride that he had persisted for so long. He said it in front of everyone. Get back together. Perhaps he was too confident in himself. He thought that she was like him, and had long regretted what happened that day. But in reality, the moment the crown prince said the holy water, he heard that extremely harsh name. He understood that this time she didn't come to get back together at all, and it wasn't for him but for the Bodhi tree. At that time, his emotions were far from being as calm as he appeared on the surface. It had only been 10 days. They had only been apart for 10 days. But she had already forgotten about him completely, and wholeheartedly took care of her Bodhi tree. No matter how he tormented her here, she didn't seem to be uncomfortable at all. He unwillingly questioned, but the answer he got was, "You and I don't like to pester." Emperor suddenly laughed. His smile was a little twisted. Pester? It seemed that she really treated all of this as a game. She was just looking for excitement with him. Otherwise, how could he have retreated so quickly? Those who said that he was heartless should really take a look at Phoenix. Compared to her calmness, he really didn't pass the mark as a game expert. He originally thought that she would understand even if he didn't say some things out loud. So he never showed his feelings on the surface. Heh, since she was just playing a game, then let's end it. He, Emperor, couldn't get anyone's heart. Chapter 8:27. He had never been so foolish before. He was waiting for her to be jealous. How could he forget that she might not even care about him? Some people were just so unrestrained that it made people's hearts turn cold. The Emperor lowered his eyes. The happiness in the demonic mirror was like a thorn in his heart. There was a thump. The demonic mirror was knocked into the heavenly lake. The immortal was shocked, but he did not dare to say anything. He followed behind the man obediently. That day, it was raining heavily in the 9th heaven. Two equally proud people. One went to the temple and the other returned to Buddhism. No one expected that the demonic mirror would be picked up by someone else. And this person was none other than one of the thoughts of Golden Lotus, the witch. She looked at the demonic mirror, and her face slowly turned gloomy. At dusk, the Venerable One summoned Phoenix and locked her up in the Thunder Temple for breaking the precepts. Golden Lotus stood aside and advised gently, "Since you have separated from the Emperor, why don't you agree with the Venerable One and marry the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea? This way you won't have to be locked up, and you won't have to listen to the rumors outside. You should know how the Dominator sees you now. I've already talked to the Eastern Sea. The Dragon King doesn't care that you were once with the Emperor. You're quite concerned about me." Phoenix supported her chin with one hand and smiled lazily. Her words and actions carried a hint of indifference. Golden Lotus did not like this attitude of hers. It was as if she was not even worth mentioning in front of her. "I'm just worried that you'll take things too hard." Golden Lotus lowered her head and played with the demonic mirror in her hand. "And I'm also very sorry about the separation between you and the Emperor." Phoenix glanced at the demonic mirror in her hand and smiled playfully. "What does our separation have to do with you?" "Nothing, but I hope that you won't blame me in the future." Golden Lotus looked into Phoenix's eyes and said, "It's very likely that I'll be with the Emperor in the future. In other words, you haven't slept with him yet?" Phoenix tossed the Buddhist scriptures aside and looked at Golden Lotus with a smile. "Do you need me to impart my experience to you?" But Phoenix smirked and pinched Golden Lotus' chin. "You probably won't be able to sleep with him. You're not good enough." Golden Lotus clenched her fists one by one. He actually didn't put her in his eyes. You can keep the mirror if you like it. You sure have fun with something that I don't want anymore. Phoenix looked down at the Golden Lotus. Also, don't appear in front of me again. Otherwise, I can't be sure that I won't kill the Buddha when I'm in a bad mood. After all, you're the Golden Lotus in front of the Buddha. For Sakya's sake, I won't touch you because you're not worth it. Hearing this, Jinlian trembled all over. She originally thought that the other party didn't know anything. Only now did he realize that Phoenix, who appeared to be innocent on the surface, actually knew what was going on. She had long seen through all her thoughts. He felt like a clown in front of her. Golden Lotus could no longer hide the resentment in her heart. Even when she slammed the door, she brought along a gust of wind. Don't think that she really didn't know anything. Once the ancient Phoenix made a move, she would be doomed eternally. So what if she cleared the sea of blood and contributed millions of merits to Buddhism? Once she did something that was not beneficial to Buddhism, she would still be cornered. She was waiting for the day when she was cornered. Golden Lotus smiled as she held the magic mirror in her hand. Moreover, she didn't believe that Phoenix didn't care at all. Who wouldn't care about such a treasure? In the wooden house, the fragrance of sandalwood rose in spirals. Little Monk followed behind Phoenix and couldn't help but ask, "My lord, why did you separate from the Emperor? My lord, don't you hate being alone the most? I think that one day I will also become a Buddha. By then, there will be no one to accompany my lord. Look at those little monks. None of them are pleasing to the eye. Also, those people from the Sixth Tao always have designs on my lord. With the Emperor around, at least he can help my lord block these annoying matters and avoid being grounded." Phoenix listened to Little Monk's words, and there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Although she didn't want to admit it, she couldn't help but think that it would be great if he could understand her loneliness like Little Monk. It would be great if he was the one who understood her. However, whenever she thought of his evil, arrogant, and indifferent face, she suddenly felt that her persistence was somewhat laughable and even a little pitiful. Everything would be easily given away by him. How much did he care about what happened between them? Actually, when he made the bet with the Crown Prince, did he not think that she would be sad? Because he liked her, he hurt her without restraint. He thought that no matter how badly he hurt her, she wouldn't give up on him, right? However, she also had her own pride. So let's end it here. For the next 100 years, she wouldn't walk out of Buddhism. Phoenix lowered her eyes and turned around. Her lonely figure seemed to carry a kind of determination. The sun set and the graceful and prosperous divine temple. The Crown Prince was still worried about someone, so he brought a pot of wine to the Emperor. "Seriously? Did you really break up with Phoenix? You shouldn't be tired of her. Didn't you say that it was very interesting to be with Phoenix 2 days ago? Who dumped who?" The Emperor looked at him and suddenly laughed. "The Crown Prince." "What?" The Crown Prince couldn't be blamed for his bad tone because every time the man called him that, something bad would happen. After all, under normal circumstances, he would directly ask him to get lost. The Emperor held his chin and tilted his handsome face. "Do you really want to know who dumped who?" "Yes." The Crown Prince nodded like a chick eating rice. His eager eyes had explained everything. The Emperor put the wine cup on the side of his hand. "Why should I tell you? Then why did you ask me if I want to know? Didn't that mean that he wanted to tell him?" The Emperor glanced at him slowly and absent-mindedly. "Of course, it's to keep you in suspense. I can't always be alone in suffering." You. As the Crown Prince of Tiandao, he was quite a coward. "Wait a minute. Where are you going?" The Emperor gave him 2 words without turning his head. "God's feast." "Hey, didn't you just come back from there? Why are you going again? There's no one there, why are you going there? It's already so late, you can go tomorrow. Don't you want to drink wine?" "Wait a minute." The Crown Prince saw that the man had no intention of stopping, so he could only clench his teeth and follow him. He was afraid that the man would do something because he could feel the surging hostility buried in this person. It was too heavy, so heavy that he could almost smell the smell of blood. However, when it was time for the feast, the man didn't go in. Instead, he stood beside the heavenly lake, as if he was looking for something. Chapter 8:28. He did not look as nonchalant as he usually did. Instead, he looked anxious. The crown prince was curious. "Hey, what are you looking for?" However, the celestial emperor turned a deaf ear to him. He bent down and walked into the heavenly lake. The water! It was cold. Before the crown prince could finish his sentence, the man bent down and reached for the bottom of the lake. He did not care if the crown prince's purple and white robe would be soaked. Still nothing. Where did it go? He clearly threw it in this place just now. You come down and look for it too. The emperor's voice was cold. It did not sound like he was negotiating. The crown prince pointed at himself with his mouth slightly open. He, the crown prince, was jumping into the heavenly lake in broad daylight. If the people from the sixth Tao found out, come down. The man's eyes suddenly became extremely cold. The crown prince coughed. He did not hesitate and immediately stepped in. He did not dare to provoke the emperor. Other than the phoenix, everyone who provoked the emperor did not have a good ending. For example, the innate divine child. It was said that the innate divine child had not recovered until now. It was fine that he was stripped of his position as a god, but he was also reduced to the path of animals. Thinking about it, the innate divine child was just blind and asked the phoenix for her hand in marriage. That was why it was said that no matter who one provoked, one should not provoke the emperor. The water in the heavenly lake was not as cold as the water in the lower realm. It was so cold that one would feel bone-chilling when one put one's finger in. The crown prince saw that the immortals were looking at the two of them. He felt like he was about to go crazy. One of them was the crown prince of the heavenly court, and the other was the emperor of the heavenly Tao. Why did they have to play with water in the middle of winter? Moreover, they had been looking for it for 2 hours. Emperor, brother. The crown prince rubbed his frozen hands. You have to tell me what you're looking for. The man did not even raise his head. He threw 2 words at him. A mirror. Just for a mirror? The crown prince screamed. His voice was raised. The man stopped and turned back to look at him. His expression was unprecedentedly cold. The crown prince paused for a moment before explaining. Well, I mean, brother, I have all the mirrors you want. You don't have to harm yourself like this. Moreover, once something falls into the heavenly lake, it is very likely that it will fall into the mortal world. Or perhaps it will be picked up by someone. You see, the world has changed. It is useless to continue searching. In fact, he had already found all the places that he could find. With their divine senses, if there really was a mirror in the heavenly lake, they would have been able to detect it. Men would definitely understand this as well. The water of the heavenly lake splashed onto his face. Emperor didn't bend over anymore. Probably because he had been in the same position for too long, even his back was a little stiff. Seeing that he had no intention of continuing the search, the crown prince took the lead and walked out of the heavenly lake. A low, rustling voice sounded beside her ear, as if it was wet from the water. I'm the one who got dumped. Suddenly, the crown prince turned back to look at the center of the heavenly lake. The man was standing there quietly. His most luxurious white fur robe in the world was already soaked. The ends of his black hair were dripping with water. His fingertips, which had never been stained by a speck of dust, were cut by something and were bleeding. The crown prince had never seen the man like this. His peach blossom eyes were filled with boundless coldness. His head was half lowered, and his black hair blocked his eyes. He could only faintly hear the sentence that he was repeating. I'm the one who got dumped. The crown prince opened his mouth. Huh? You're not joking, right? Emperor didn't say anything else. He came out of the heavenly lake and left the crown prince far behind. He didn't know why. The crown prince looked at the back of the wet figure. He had a feeling that the man wasn't joking just now. Ever since that day, Emperor rarely left the temple. He didn't seem to be interested in anything. The people of Tiandao only heard that the emperor had lost something he loved. They didn't know what it was. Occasionally, There would be heavenly feasts. The man didn't participate and rejected many invitations. Two immortals stood at the door and were in charge of rejecting invitations. These invitations for Emperor to drink have piled up into a mountain. There are 5 or 6 from Snow Girls. What should we do? Throw them all away. Emperor won't go. All right. Clumsily, the two immortals moved the invitation and poked their little heads into the room to take a look. At this time, someone from Buddhism came to deliver the invitations. He asked, "Is Emperor here? Tomorrow, the Venerable One will invite all deities to a banquet." "Huh? I'm really sorry. Emperor hasn't been feeling well these few days." Before the immortals could finish, they were interrupted by a deep voice. "What time tomorrow?" It was Emperor. He walked out of the temple, noble and handsome as usual. The little monk told him the time and left with his palms together. The immortals looked at the Emperor in confusion. That was strange. Didn't Emperor not attend any banquets? Why did he agree to Buddhism's invitation? "Occasionally, I want to go out and take a breather." This was the man's answer to the immortals. However, they still felt that there must be something that they didn't expect. Fortunately, Buddhism came to deliver the invitations. The next day, Emperor's mood seemed to be better. Even the demons behind him didn't seem to be very angry. However, Phoenix didn't sit on the seat of honor during the Buddhist banquet. After all, she was still a sinner and was still in confinement. Behind her Buddha body was the place where the Venerable asked her to recite the scriptures. She could hear the sound of zither in the hall of great strength. People kept coming in and talking in low voices. Under such circumstances, she couldn't sleep anymore. She took out a book from the wooden cabinet and prepared to read. Then, she heard someone call, "Emperor." Phoenix's fingers paused. The person continued, "I heard that Emperor is in a bad mood recently. Is it because of Phoenix?" What does my mood have to do with her?" The man's voice was very low, as if he was mocking her. Phoenix tilted her head and smiled. The voices from the hall kept coming. "That's right. How can the Emperor be in a bad mood because of her? I think it's probably because of the witch who suddenly disappeared. I heard that she was taken in by Buddhism." This time, the man didn't deny it. Phoenix didn't listen anymore. She picked up the book and turned around. However, when she walked, her fingertips couldn't help but tremble. That indifferent tone. It was really hurtful. What does my mood have to do with her? Since that was the case, she could just leave. Tomorrow, she would lose her 6 senses and enter the formless realm. Since she was going to be confined anyway, she might as well stay there for 100 years and fulfill a great wish. In the past, she always thought that being together meant that they liked each other. Now she understood that the pure and beautiful things were just her imagination. Chapter 8:29. Have you made up your mind? The Venerable sat on the golden lotus throne. His expression was as serene as ever. Phoenix moved her fingers and turned the scimitar into prayer beads. She wrapped the prayer beads around her slender wrist and said, "Yes. You won't use your blade for 100 years? The Venerable frowned. Phoenix knew what he was thinking. She smiled and said, "Back then, when the true Buddha returned to his original form, he swore that he would not become a Buddha until the sea of blood was empty. Now I'm going to complete a great merit. The Venerable should have no reason to stop me. Even if I'm the blade of Buddhism, I still need to rest." "What kind of great merit do you want to complete?" the Venerable asked in a low voice. Phoenix looked up. Her battle robe fluttered in the wind. She said clearly, "Let Bodhi transform into a human." The Venerable was stunned. He frowned and thought for a while. In the end, he chanted Amitabha and said to the little monk beside him, "Let her go. 100 years should not cause any trouble." Little monk followed behind Phoenix. He frowned and said, "My lord, you wasted such a good opportunity. Why don't you ask for something for yourself instead of letting Bodhi transform into a human?" "I don't even have freedom. What should I ask for?" Phoenix lowered her eyes and smiled. If it wasn't for Bodhi, I don't know how pathetic I would be. Little monk hesitated for a while. He said in a low voice, "You can ask the Buddha to send the emperor back to you. You've forgotten again. That person isn't controlled by fate at all." Phoenix's smile faded. "Moreover, sometimes that person is the most special. That's why I don't want to use this method to get him. Because even if I do get him, it won't be him." Little monk listened to her in a daze. He did not understand what his lord meant. However, he knew that the emperor did not like his lord anymore. He had fallen in love with someone else. Perhaps this was what it meant to be unable to obtain what one wished for. The little monk felt sorry for Phoenix, so he packed all the things that Phoenix liked to use. Then, he looked at Phoenix with his big eyes and said, "My lord, after you come out again, I will definitely become a Buddha. After becoming a Buddha, I can't be as immature as I am now. However, my lord, you have to remember this. If others speak ill of you, I will stand up and help you." Phoenix smiled and stroked the little monk's bald head with her fingers. Then, she walked to the Bodhi tree with the mythical water in hand. That was the last time Phoenix watered Bodhi. "I'll be going into seclusion in a while. This time, I'll be going for a longer period of time, 100 years. However, in this place, 100 years was nothing. Bodhi, when you become an adult, I'll recognize you at first glance. When you go to the mortal world, you can also pray for me. My hands are stained with blood, so I'll leave the incense-burning matter to you." After that, Phoenix took the prepared items and entered the forbidden land of Buddha. Legend had it that it was the most beautiful place in the Trayastrimsa heaven within the 6 paths. When Sakya became a Buddha, every time he recited a sutra, a beautiful lotus would bloom there. Over time, it became a glazed Buddhist realm surrounded by endless lotuses. No evil aura could penetrate it. Only those who had the position of Buddha and made a great wish could enter. 100 years was indeed not a long time. It was only a year in the lower realm. During this period, Phoenix had caused too many rumors and slanders. It would be better to lock her up for 100 years. It would also correct the atmosphere of Buddhism. However, the honored sir did not expect that on the 5th day after Phoenix stepped into the forbidden land of Buddha, the heavenly Tao suddenly provoked the Buddhist Tao. In the rolling clouds, a man stood tall, wearing a pure black armor. Countless demons surged behind him. Buddhism was in a mess. The true Buddha did not return to one. Usually, other than Phoenix, no one in Buddhism was good at fighting. Although Buddhism accepted the challenge, they lost in the end. Within the 6 paths, no one could stop this man at all. On Mountain Tenya, all the Buddhas stood above the clouds. The sky-breaking evil spirit swept over as if it was forcing Buddhism to send someone over. The immortals on Tian Dao's side were also puzzled. What is going on with Buddhism this time? They have been beaten up to this extent. Why is there no sign of Phoenix? When the man heard this, he looked up. His hand was still dripping with blood. His eyes wandered among the Buddhas. However, he could not find the figure who was originally standing at the front, holding a scimitar and burning like fire. She was not at the last Buddhist banquet. He thought that she would at least appear when the two sides fought. In the end, he still could not see her. He always knew that according to that person's character, once they were separated, they would never be related again. Although he knew, he could not help but feel angry. The emperor tightened his grip on the battle axe and leaped through the light of Buddha. He pinched the throat of one of the bodhisattvas and laughed coldly. "Your Lord Phoenix is really not worried at all. What kind of trick are you playing this time? Are you trying to make us, the heavenly axiom, lower our guard and catch us off guard?" No. The bodhisattva found it difficult to speak. Emperor, the heavenly Tao and the Buddhist Tao are one family. No matter which sect is more powerful, the Buddhist Tao will not say anything. As for Lord Phoenix, she really isn't here. 5 days ago, she entered the colorless glaze realm to fulfill her great wish. Cough cough, not many people know about this. It's no wonder the emperor misunderstood us, the Buddhist Tao. Suddenly, the man's eyes turned cold. "Where did you say she went?" "The colorless glaze realm. The Buddha was frightened by his gaze and explained, "Emperor, monks do not lie. In order to make Bodhi turn into a human, Lady Phoenix made a request to the Venerable. She was willing to put down her machete and recite sutras for 100 years in exchange for the gospel. In order to make Bodhi turn into a human?" The man repeated this sentence and suddenly laughed. There was an unprecedented black fog in his deep eyes. This kind of black fog came from the beginning of chaos and was enough to make all demons tremble. The Arhat was so frightened by his appearance that he couldn't speak. Suddenly, he thought of what people said before. This time, the reason why the emperor personally led the army to attack Buddhism was all because of the missing witch. Therefore, the Buddhas immediately shouted, "Emperor, calm down. That which was not taken in by Buddhism." Whether it was the people of Tiandao or Buddhism, they all heard his words clearly. Tiandao immediately realized that something was wrong. This time they did come to fight Buddhism, but they had never thought of making a big deal out of it. This was because within the sixth Tao, without Buddhism, there would be fewer checks and balances on the lower realm. The emperor should have understood this. After all, it was not like this had never happened before. But today, why did he? The crown prince was afraid that something unexpected would happen. He moved closer to the emperor's ear. "That's enough. Buddhism has already given in. We should withdraw our troops. You." Chapter 830. Whoosh! He did not give the crown prince a chance to speak. The man waved his long sleeves, leaving everyone with a cold back view. At first, the crown prince thought that the emperor was going back to the divine hall. As he walked, he realized that he was not going back to the divine hall. Instead, he was going directly to Buddhism. The crown prince's expression suddenly changed. He was worried and immediately followed him on the cloud. The evil aura emitted by the man was simply unstoppable. The cloak on his body was flapping fiercely, as if it could cut the gospel above Buddhism. He seemed to be in a killing frenzy. His handsome face was stained with blood. The crown prince stood in front of him and said in a heavy voice, "Calm down." "Calm down?" The man laughed. His long and narrow eyes were dyed red. Every day he was calculating how to meet her, whether it was the Buddhist feast or the Battle of Tiandao. He was thinking that she would definitely appear. He really looked like a fool for coming here just because of the slightest possibility. 2 days ago, he was still worried that she would not forgive him because he lost the magic mirror. She had never thought that he would be replaced by someone else during the time they were apart, chanting scriptures for 100 years in exchange for the gospel. She had always been a person who did not like to be restrained, but she was willing to go to this extent for a Bodhi tree. However, she still thought that he was too harmless. After she was with him, could she still be with someone else? Did she think that he would let go after entering the forbidden land of Buddha? He would find her even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground. Bang! The battle axe fell from the sky like thunder and struck the floating clouds on Mountain Tenya. Hundreds of millions of shards flew and shone like exploding stardust. The roaring tide swept through all the vast space in an instant. The little Shami who lived on Mountain Tenya looked up. They saw a man in a cloak standing in the air above the dense group of demons in the distance. The void behind him seemed to be burning with raging flames. In the hurricane that connected heaven and earth, it emitted a strong demonic breath that made people shudder. Above the floating clouds, his figure was very lonely, even a little cold. The man looked at the forbidden land of Buddha. His hair was black and his eyes were scarlet. There was a strong evil aura on his handsome face. However, his gaze was very deep. Amidst the blood on the side of his face, there was a kind of coldness that would not waver even if he was hit by a blade or an axe. The hall of great strength was shrouded by dark clouds. Finally, the Venerable One could not bear to watch any longer. His Buddha body descended and raised the demon-subduing pestle. Bang! The sound of the bell reverberated throughout Mount Meru, causing all the demons and immortals in the 6 paths to gulp. Since ancient times, only monks who had committed grave sins would be thrown into the Vajra bell. When the bell rang, their bones and tendons would break, and their flesh and blood would shatter, and they would be shaken to death. The crown prince could not take another step forward. The group of monsters retreated, and the black gas dispersed. The demonic bells of 10,000 demonic bells rang at the same time. The ghosts of the hungry ghost path struggled to reach out their bony claws from the gates of hell. Huge waves surged in the sea of blood. The heavenly weapons from Tian Dao stopped in their tracks. At the top of the 33 levels of heaven, only the emperor was standing in the air. His robe was fluttering, and half of his face was stained with blood. The venerable one was bitten by the breath, and a mouthful of blood overflowed from his throat. He chanted Amitabha, put his palms together, and sat high on the lotus. Emperor, Tian Dao and Buddhism are indispensable. Do you really want to destroy Buddhism? The man smiled, and the symbol of a fallen demon was reflected on his face. His consciousness seemed to be in a mess. One of his eyes symbolized the gold of Tian Dao, while the other symbolized the red of hell. He looked down at the venerable one, and the coldness at the corner of his mouth seemed to be able to freeze everything. The venerable one sighed softly in his ear. Why bother? You should know that the one she likes is not you. Boom! Thunder roared. The bell rang more and more frequently, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were galloping past, and as if lightning and thunder were falling from the sky. However, these sounds were not as loud as the other party's words. The one she likes is not you. The emperor only felt his eardrums ringing, and the blood in his body reversed to the top. He could no longer hold back and swung the divine axe. Bang! A corner of the Vajra bell was cut off. The venerable one was shocked, and quickly turned around. A group of demons broke out of the bell, roaring and dancing wildly. They transformed into a scene of hell, and let out wanton roars. For thousands of years, Buddhism had never experienced such a threat. The venerable one on the lotus experienced regret for the first time. If he had expected this, he would never have locked up Phoenix. The true Buddha had not returned to one. He had been carrying out the Buddhist war for many years, and thought that he could cover the sky with one hand, but he did not expect to be in such a situation. In the rolling clouds, the man broke through the air, and without waiting for anyone to react, he directly grabbed the venerable one's throat. The venerable one looked down, and with a hoarse voice, he said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "If you destroy Buddhism, Phoenix will not be able to live." The man's fingers paused, and his eyes became colder. I didn't expect Buddhism to become like this. No wonder the true Buddha will not return to one. Amitabha, the disaster of love has always been difficult to avoid. The venerable one looked into the man's eyes. The pain of not being able to get what one wants. If the emperor could convert to Buddhism, there would be another kind of result. Unfortunately, the emperor was born in chaos, and his state of mind could not be at peace, so Buddhism missed him again. Now, I want to ask the emperor again, are you willing to convert to Buddhism? The man laughed. Who said that I can't get what I want? I know that the heavenly axiom is God, and I can never escape from your Buddha eyes. If I am no longer a god, even if I kill you, it doesn't matter. The venerable one was completely stunned, and before he could react, the man in front of him transformed into the original Dharma of chaos, and the black feathers that covered the sky and earth came one after another, piercing into his chest. In Mount Bujo of hell, the earth began to tremble, and the rocks cracked. A raging fire suddenly burned from the earth's core, and wrapped the black feathers around the man's legs, little by little. In the cold wind, the man's smile became more and more evil and disdainful. The venerable one did not expect that the other party would voluntarily give up the divinity. Outside the 99 levels of heaven, the crown prince of the heavenly axiom seemed to have suddenly seen something incredible. He suddenly stopped and looked at the sky in shock. This is? Someone is going to fall from heaven and become a demon. Boom! The big bell shattered, and the copper pieces shook and fell, making an earth-shattering sound. Following that, Countless black feathers flew down from the sky and landed on the Venerable One's body. In the loud sound, the man's sneer could be faintly heard. "If I become a demon, what can Buddha do to me?" In an instant, countless black feathers came tumbling and turned into a continuous sea of blood. The heavenly axiom was strange, and there were many living things. The road ahead was obscure like a fog, but the man was unmoved. He broke the divinity, leaned back, and smiled. As his clothes fluttered in the wind, he fell from heaven and became a demon. Chapter 831. Both the heavenly and Buddhist sects saw this and their expressions changed. Back then, the emperor was born from chaos. In order to prevent him from going to hell, both the heavenly and Buddhist sects tried their best to influence him. Now that he gave up his divinity, it meant that there would be an unprecedented devil in the lower three realms, which was hell. By then, both the Buddhist sects and the heavenly axiom would be trampled under his feet. "No, we can't let him become a devil." The heavenly axiom was furious and personally sent 30,000 heavenly soldiers to seal the emperor at the beginning of his fall from heaven. However, none of the heavenly soldiers could enter the chaos. After 3 days, in the afternoon of the last evening, the emperor finally became a devil. The blood sea surged with unprecedented waves. Countless demons cheered and transformed into their original forms, surging out from the back of the man. Countless black crows flew across the sky. The black river under the 18 levels of hell seemed to be boiling. The man stood in the midst of thousands of demons. His evil smile could make the Dead Sea surge. This was undoubtedly a catastrophe for both the heavenly and Buddhist sects. The destiny was broken. Demons broke through the earth's crust. The demon world was filled with the beautiful and deadly song of the mermaid. That was the most humiliating 100 years for both the heavenly and Buddhist sects. They were no longer the overlords of the 6 realms. Instead, they were tied down because the person who ruled the lower 3 realms was the heavenly God Emperor. Many of the heavenly axioms people even transformed into their original forms to follow him. Hundreds of demons traveled at night. No one could stop them. It was a rare sight in the world. The Buddhist sects started to rejoice. Everyone who gave up their divinity would lose their memory of being a god in the chaos. Otherwise, the emperor who became a devil would definitely take revenge for the witch's capture. He would lead the demons to attack the heavenly mountain. Although they were rejoicing, the Buddhist sects were still the Buddhist sects. They could not stand the fact that the demons of the lower 3 realms dared to disrespect them. Over time, they started to resent the people of the lower realm. However, when the emperor fell from heaven, he had already destroyed the Buddha body of the Venerable. Now, no one in the Buddhist sects was a match for that person. Unless, Venerable One, for the sake of all living beings in the world, we cannot allow the demons to wreak havoc anymore. Someone must go to Mount Bujo, someone must clear the blood sea of hell. The Venerable sat in the twilight. His face had a scar from top to bottom, which was even scarier than the evil ghosts of hell. If the sea of blood is not empty, the true Buddha can't return to one. However, for hundreds of years, after the sea of blood is emptied, there will be unforeseen events. This time it's the devil's path. I can only ask the phoenix to go to hell again. Although it's still a year away, for the sake of the world, my Buddha will definitely be merciful and understand. As he spoke, the Venerable One looked to his left. Jinlian, you will strike the bell. It's time for the door of Thunder Temple to reopen. Yes. Jinlian turned around and left. As his Buddhist beads rolled, Sanskrit chants resounded. Phoenix walked out of the light of Buddha. Behind her was the snow-covered mountain Tenya. The legendary forbidden land of Buddha was unbelievably beautiful. However, the most beautiful thing was the wanton and lazy figure. 100 years had passed, but the ancient phoenix was still breathtakingly beautiful, especially when she walked toward you. Her deep and pure black eyes seemed to be able to suck you in. She seemed to be more noble than before. Her waterfall-like black hair sank into the ice. Her snow-white kasaya and fiery cape made her look extremely handsome and arrogant. Seeing Jinlian, the smile on Phoenix's face did not change. She casually threw the scripture in her palm aside without saying a word. Jinlian slowly clenched her hands that were hidden under her long sleeves. She then followed her with a faint smile. Buddhism was the best at glossing over peace. It did not mention the cause and effect of the past 100 years. It recited the scripture, "Phoenix, the sea of blood in hell has risen again. If hell is not empty, Buddha will not return to one. Go and clear the world of evil." Phoenix did not say anything. She brought her scimitar forward and fell into the demon-infested Buzhou mountain. However, she did not expect to see that person in hell. The two of them looked at each other. However, he acted as if he did not know her at all. His attention was only on the face of the witch beside him. Phoenix was stunned. She did not care who he was looking at. Instead, it was his pair of dark eyes that turned demonic red. It was as if blood was flowing in them. From the beginning to the end, he gave off an evil and bewitching vibe. That was the first time Phoenix did not attack immediately. In a trance, a cold wind blew past her ears and an evil spirit left a mark on her arm. She frowned and pulled her scimitar. There was no more sin within 3 meters of her. He gave up the divinity? Why? This was the question that Phoenix had always wanted to ask. That person clearly liked to be high and mighty. He did not attract any dust. His food, clothing, housing, and transportation had always been noble. How could he become a demon in the lower realm? Soon, someone told her the answer. The demons were discussing among themselves, saying, "The emperor fell from heaven just so that he could find the witch who was taken in by Buddhism from the chaos. It's a pity that he couldn't do it. But it doesn't matter. The witch was born from the devil world. Soon, the emperor will be able to reconstruct her soul." Phoenix listened and froze on the spot. She thought that it would not hurt anymore. After all, 99 years had passed. In fact, it was not as painful as she thought. It was just that she was very clear-headed, as if she had suddenly opened all 7 orifices. It turned out that it was not that he did not like anyone. It was just that the person he liked was not her. It seemed that, as people said, true love was not just a single thing. It was something that had to be put into one's eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That was why he fell from heaven and became a demon. Phoenix could not explain her feelings. A long time ago, she was attracted to this person because everything he did was what she wanted to do. But now she could no longer appreciate it. At the foot of Mount Buzhou, Phoenix looked at the back of the person who was gradually disappearing into the night. It was the first time that she went against Buddhism. After a long time, Buddhism did not receive any news of Phoenix's action. They began to be suspicious. 18 golden Buddha seals descended from the sky, summoning Phoenix back to the mountain. The Buddhas frowned and asked her, "Why did you not do it?" Phoenix knelt under the Bodhi tree and did not say a word. Golden Lotus walked towards her and sighed with pity. "My lord, why did you do this? You should know that that person would not even look back at the things that he did not want. If he still liked you, he would not have fallen from heaven and become a demon. 100 years may be a long time for mortals, but it is not difficult for deities and Buddhas to wait. It is just that he has never thought of waiting for you." Chapter 832. Golden Lotus was very pleased with herself. However, she did not expect the indifference in Phoenix's eyes to be so obvious. It was as if she had seen through her wishful thinking. "It seems that you still haven't slept with him in the 100 years that I've been there. However, I'm curious. Is it possible that he still doesn't remember your name?" Golden Lotus suddenly froze. Phoenix chuckled softly. Golden Lotus bit her thin lips and shook her head with a sigh. "Since you don't want to clear the Blood Sea, there's another way. The East Sea has sent a betrothal gift. If you're willing to marry, you can stabilize the situation." "I'm not marrying." These 2 words enraged all the Buddhas. Golden Lotus opened her mouth wide and gasped. "My lord, are you going against the Buddha's order?" As Golden Lotus's words fell, The Sanskrit chants resounded and echoed throughout Mountain Tenya. Each word was full of questions for Phoenix. The Buddhas did not stop Golden Lotus because in their hearts, stabilizing the status of Buddhism was the most important thing. There were some things that they could not say. After all, Phoenix's Buddha position was there. However, it was different now. Once Phoenix violated the Buddha's order, she would be punished by the Thunder Tribulation. Golden Lotus was aware of this. That was why she proposed to let Phoenix marry at this time. Since she could not deal with this woman, she might as well let the heavens punish her. That was the only fear of the ancient Phoenix. Golden Lotus was sure that Phoenix would not refuse. Sure enough, after she opened her mouth, the woman who had always looked down on her did not speak again. Golden Lotus smiled slowly. My lord has always been a smart person. Since you've decided to marry at a lower level, let the people around you prepare as soon as possible. I'll also help you prepare the wedding clothes. After saying that, Golden Lotus was about to turn around and return to her seat. However, in the next second, a lazy voice sounded behind her ear. So what if I violate the Buddha's order? Golden Lotus suddenly turned around and saw Phoenix looking at her with raised eyebrows. His expression was full of mockery. Golden Lotus clenched her fists. My lord, you should know better than anyone else what will happen to you if you go against the Buddha's order. Even if you can avoid the heavenly tribulation, your destiny will follow you for life. You will never grow old. You will always have to obey the Buddha's order and marry Dong Hai. Hey, you did remind me of that. Phoenix curled her lips into a faint smile. Jinlian looked at her in confusion. Even the Buddhas at the side looked in the direction of Phoenix. The next second, Phoenix held the scimitar in her hand and abruptly stabbed it into his left shoulder. Then, he pulled out the last Buddha bone from his body while dripping with blood. All the Buddhas took a deep breath and widened their eyes. When did she start to have such thoughts? In the face of the complicated gazes, Phoenix just chuckled and suddenly exerted strength in her fingers. As an immortal bird, I will be reborn after experiencing thousands of tribulations. Since this destiny is given by Buddhism, then I will cut off this Buddhist fate. Bang! It was as if something had collapsed from a corner of Mountain Tenya. In the Thunder Temple, the stone statue of Wisdom King, the head of all the Buddhas, shattered. At that moment, time seemed to be frozen. As time passed slowly, blood spurted out from Phoenix's shoulder like a flame that set the prairie ablaze and approached the Buddhas. Golden Lotus's face turned pale in an instant. As Buddhas, they knew that once the ancient Phoenix attacked, there would be countless casualties. However, they had never seen Phoenix's evil face. She was so unstoppable. Since I was able to establish the Buddha's body with my military achievements, I can also kill the Buddha and transform his bones. From now on, I will no longer be the head of all the Buddhas, the Sword Wisdom King. Phoenix's 5 fingers cracked and blood flowed from her arm into the Buddha's door. She held the scimitar and pointed it forward. Golden Lotus was instantly bounced back a few meters and landed heavily on the ground. Blood gushed out from her throat. Phoenix, do you know what you are doing? Of course I know. Am I not killing the Buddha? Phoenix looked at her condescendingly and smiled. You are the one who doesn't know what you are doing. I've said it before. If you appear in front of me again, I will kill you with one strike. The unprecedented murderous aura made Golden Lotus retreat awkwardly. At that moment, she could no longer care about her image. She knew that if Phoenix really wanted to attack, she would not be able to win. However, Golden Lotus was still wrong. The Phoenix did not simply want to attack. Instead, it truly wanted to kill. Whoosh! Another strike of the scimitar fell. Golden Lotus was so frightened that her expression changed abruptly. She stretched out her hand and wanted to call the Buddhas for help. The Buddhas also wanted to help. However, they did not expect the power of Phoenix's blood to be so strong. The fire even spread to the entire Mahavira Hall. Golden Lotus turned around abruptly and begged Phoenix for mercy. Master, think carefully. Once you kill me, you will be betraying Buddhism. It's okay if you don't want to marry me. I can plead with the Venerable and the Buddhas for you. As long as you promise not to kill me, everything will be negotiable. She was raised by the Venerable for 1,000 years before she could transform into a human. If the sea of blood had not been cleared and the Sanskrit had not fallen from the sky, she would not have become a Buddha. This was the good fortune that she had cultivated for 1,000 years. She could not let this go to waste. She had not become a righteous Buddha, and she had not gotten that man. She could not die. Golden Lotus thought that as long as she said that, Phoenix would stop. However, the truth was that Phoenix casually raised her scimitar again. So what if I betray Buddhism? At the same time, the Phoenix's clear cry resounded in the void from all directions. Countless shadows of the scimitar fell on Golden Lotus. She wanted to resist, but she realized that she could not withstand the ancient Phoenix's clear cry at all. As a Golden Lotus, ordinary weapons could not hurt her at all. However, Phoenix's scimitar could destroy her Buddha body completely. The moment the sharp pain came, Golden Lotus was split into countless pieces with a bang. Blood dripped in front of the Buddhas and dyed the stairs of Buddhism red. Phoenix was also involved in the heavens trial because of this. Betraying Buddhism was like cutting the flesh from the bones. Suddenly, several blazing thunderbolts fell from the sky from Mountain Tenya, and each of them struck Phoenix's body. The Buddhas were not evil people, and they wanted to save her. However, no one could withstand the heavens trial of betraying Buddhism. Therefore, the Buddhas worked together to form the light of Buddha, which turned into a Vajra shield. They covered each other and the little Samanas except for Phoenix. Bang! The second thunderbolt struck. Phoenix grabbed the clothes on her chest and coughed out a big mouthful of blood. She could vaguely see the Venerable sitting high on the Golden Lotus. Are you really going to leave Buddhism? The heavens trial of 33 thunderbolts. Phoenix, you can't withstand it. In the face of the Venerable's persuasion, Phoenix only smiled and said, "Get lost." Boom. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.